My sister and I graduated medical school on the same day, standing side by side in our caps and gowns. At the celebratory dinner that night, my father tapped his glass and handed my sister a check for $250,000 to pay off her entire student loan debt. When I asked about my loans, my mother simply touched my hand and said, "You are the strong one, Zora. You can handle the debt, but your sister needs a fresh start." I said nothing. I did not tell them about the patent I had just sold, or the multi-million-dollar asset I had quietly acquired. I just smiled, took a sip of my wine, and watched them celebrate the golden child. They had no idea that in less than 6 months, I would own the very house they were sleeping in. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my toxic family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been punished for being the responsible one. The crystal chandelier at Le Bernardin shimmered above us, casting a warm glow over the white tablecloths and the untouched seafood towers. My father David stood up, adjusting his silk tie, tapping his spoon against his champagne flute to silence the table. I sat up straighter, my heart doing a small hopeful flutter in my chest. We had done it. Chloe and I were officially doctors. Surely this was the moment where the playing field leveled out. My father cleared his throat, beaming at the table full of relatives. "Tonight is about legacy," he announced, his voice booming with pride. "Raising two daughters to become doctors is no small feat. But we all know that the journey is harder for some." He turned his gaze to Chloe, my younger sister by 2 years, who was already dabbing at dry eyes with a linen napkin. "Chloe, baby girl, we know how much stress you have been under. We want you to start your residency and your marriage to Brad with a clean slate." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a long, slim envelope. He slid it across the table to her. Chloe opened it, her manicured hands trembling theatrically. She gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh my God, Daddy! It is a cashier's check for $250,000. It is enough to wipe out your medical school debt entirely," my father said, puffing out his chest. "You are free, sweetheart." The table erupted in applause. My aunts and uncles reached over to hug her. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, waiting. I waited for him to reach into his other pocket. I waited for him to say my name. But he just sat back down, picking up his wine glass, satisfied. The silence in my head was deafening. I looked at my mother, Patricia. She was beaming at Chloe. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the noise. "Dad, what about me?" The air left the room instantly. My father looked at me, genuinely confused, as if I had just asked to be served a live grenade on a platter. "What about you, Zora?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "My loans, Dad. I have $300,000 in debt. We went to the same medical school. We graduated on the same day." My mother sighed, a long-suffering sound that she had perfected over 30 years. "Zora, do not do this. Do not make this about you." "How is this making it about me?" I asked, my voice rising just an octave. "You just paid off Chloe's entire education." Patricia reached across the table and patted my hand, her touch cold and condescending. "Honey, look at you. You have always been the resilient one. You are a survivor. You worked 2 jobs in undergrad. You are used to the struggle. Chloe is different. She is sensitive. She is about to be a bride. Brad comes from a very prominent family. We cannot send her into that marriage with baggage. It would look bad for us." I pulled my hand away as if she had burned me. "Maybe he had a check for me too." "You are causing a scene," he hissed, grabbing my arm. "Get back inside and finish your dinner." "Is that all you care about?" I asked, yanking my arm away. "Appearances." "Dad, I tutored her. For 4 years of undergrad and 4 years of medical school, I tutored her. I wrote her admission essays. I stayed up all night helping her memorize anatomy while she was out partying with Brad. I dragged her across the finish line. And this is how you thank me." He hardened his jaw. "You did what a big sister is supposed to do. You looked out for her. That does not entitle you to my retirement money. We had to make a choice, Zora. We could only afford to clear one of you. And we chose the one who needs it. You are going to be a neurosurgeon. You will make plenty of money. Eventually. You can pay your own way. It builds character. I stared at him, realizing for the first time that he did not just favor her. He resented me. He resented that I did not need him. He resented that I did not play the damsel for him to save. Character, I spat out. I have enough character for this entire family. Enjoy your dessert, Dad. I am going home. I stood by the valet stand, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my ticket. The humidity of the Atlanta night felt like a wet blanket wrapping around my throat, choking me. Behind me, the heavy oak doors swung open again, and I heard the click of my mother's heels on the pavement. Zora, you are being ridiculous, my mother called out, her voice tight with annoyance, not concern. You cannot just storm out of a family celebration because you are feeling sensitive. Sensitive? I spun around to face them. My father was lighting a cigar, looking bored. My mother was adjusting her shawl, looking irritated. Is that what you call it? Mom, I worked 3 jobs in undergrad. I bartended until 4 in the morning so I could send Chloe money for books, because you guys said cash flow was tight. I tutored organic chemistry on weekends when I should have been studying for my own MCATs just to pay her rent supplement. You told me you were broke. You told me we all had to sacrifice to get her through. My father exhaled a plume of smoke, looking at me with cold detachment. And we appreciate that, Zora. You were a good big sister. But that is in the past. Why are you bringing up old history now? You are nickeling and diming your own family. It is unbecoming. Nickeling and diming, I shouted, causing the valet to look up from his podium. You just gave her $250,000. You lied to me. You said there was no money. You let me take out maximum loans at 6% interest, while you were secretly saving a nest egg for her. Because I am the workhorse, and she is the show pony. That is it, isn't it? Patricia stepped into my personal space, her perfume cloying and sweet. Lower your voice, she hissed. People are staring. You are acting like a jealous, petulant child. It is ugly, Zora. This envy looks ugly on you. We did what we had to do to ensure Chloe's future. She needs the help. You don't. You have always been sturdy. You can handle the burden. Chloe is delicate. She needs a soft landing. And frankly, with an attitude like this, it is no wonder Brad chose her. Men don't like women who keep score. The cruelty of it slapped me harder than a physical blow. Sturdy. That was their code word for expendable. For the one who didn't need love, only maintenance. I stared at them, seeing them clearly for the first time. You are right, I said, my voice trembling. I can handle it. I have handled everything you threw at me my entire life, but do not expect me to be grateful for the scraps anymore. My father stepped forward, his imposing frame casting a shadow over me. You will get in your car, you will go home, and you will sleep this off. And tomorrow you will apologize to your sister for trying to ruin her night. If I hear one word about you making Chloe feel guilty about this gift, there will be consequences. Do not test me, Zora. This is her time. Do not steal her spotlight with your drama. The valet pulled up in my 10-year-old Honda, the brakes squealing loudly in the elegant driveway. My father sneered at the car. See, he said, gesturing at my rusted bumper. You clearly need to focus on your own affairs instead of worrying about your sister's. Drive safe. They turned their backs on me, walking back toward the warmth and light of the restaurant, leaving me alone in the dark with my debt and my anger. The sunlight filtered through the cracked blinds of my studio apartment, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stale air. I rolled over on the mattress that sat directly on the floor because I could not afford a bed frame yet. My head was pounding, a lingering reminder of the champagne I did not get to drink and the tears I had shed in my car the night before. I reached for my phone, hoping against hope for a text from my father. Maybe an apology, maybe a secret transfer of funds. But there was nothing from him. Instead, there was a notification from the federal loan servicer that made my blood run cold. Important notice regarding your repayment plan. I clicked it, my breath hitching in my throat. Due to the recent adjustment in federal interest rates, your new monthly payment has been calculated. $3,800 due on the first of the month. I stared at the number until it blurred. I was a resident. I made $60,000 a year. After taxes and the rent for this shoebox, that payment was mathematically impossible. I was drowning. I was sinking into a hole so deep I would never climb out. I dragged myself out of bed and shuffled to the kitchenette. The refrigerator hummed loudly, a broken sound that matched my mood. I opened the cupboard. It was almost empty. A box of stale crackers, a jar of peanut butter, and a stack of instant ramen cups. I grabbed a beef-flavored cup and boiled water in the electric kettle. This was the breakfast of a neurosurgeon in training: sodium and dehydrated regret. While the noodles steeped, I sat on the wobbly stool at the counter and opened Instagram. It was a form of self-torture, I knew, but I could not stop myself. I needed to see it. I needed to see what my sacrifice had bought. And there she was. Chloe had posted 10 minutes ago. The location tag read the St. Regis Atlanta Spa. The photo showed her reclining on a massage table wrapped in a plush white robe, a glass of cucumber water in her manicured hand. Her skin looked radiant, glowing with the kind of peace that only financial security can buy. The caption made me want to throw my phone through the window. It read, "First day of the rest of my life. So incredibly blessed to start my career debt-free and stress-free. Thank you, Mommy and Daddy, for the best graduation gift a girl could ask for. No loans, just vibes. Hashtag Dr. Life, hashtag debt-free journey, hashtag blessed." I looked down at my cup of noodles. The steam rose up, carrying the artificial scent of beef seasoning. I looked around at my peeling wallpaper and the stack of medical textbooks I had bought used and highlighted until the pages were falling out. I had graduated top of my class. I had published 2 papers in prestigious journals. I was on track to become the chief resident. And I was eating slop in a slum, while my sister, who had barely passed her boards, was getting a hot stone massage. The injustice burned in my chest, hotter than the boiling water. They did not just give her money, they gave her a head start. They gave her the ability to breathe while I was suffocating. I took a bite of the noodles, and they tasted like ash. I realized then that they did not care if I drowned. In fact, they were counting on it. My phone screamed at 5:14 in the morning, vibrating violently against the plywood crate I used as a nightstand. I groaned, dragging myself out of a nightmare where I was drowning in a sea of unpaid bills, only to wake up to the reality of them. I squinted at the screen. It was Chloe. Of course it was. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but my sister had a habit of calling the police for a wellness check if I ignored her for more than 3 rings. I slid my thumb across the screen, my voice raspy with sleep. "Hello, Zora, thank God you are awake." Her voice was chirpy, bright, and completely devoid of the tension that had suffocated us in the parking lot just 8 hours ago. "I have a massive crisis." I sat up, rubbing my face. "Did you kill a patient, Chloe?" "Do not be morbid, Zora. It is about the wedding." Brad's mother, Mrs. Sterling, just flew in from the Hamptons early. She pulled some strings and got us a private after-hours appointment at the bridal salon tonight. "It is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Zora. She wants to buy me a couture gown." "That sounds nice, Chloe," I said, fighting the urge to hang up. "But why are you calling me at the crack of dawn?" "Because I am scheduled for the overnight trauma shift in the ER tonight," she said, as if the solution was obvious. "I cannot go to the fitting if I am stitching up drunks. I need you to cover for me." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Chloe, are you insane? I just came off a 36-hour rotation. I have not slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. I am exhausted." "Please, Zora," she whined, dropping into the baby voice that always made our father open his wallet. "If I call out, Dr. Silva will write me up. He already hates me. But he loves you. If you take the shift, he won't care. You are the resident genius, remember. I cannot do it, Chloe. I need to rest. I need to figure out my finances since Dad decided to give my inheritance to you." There was a silence on the other end. Then her voice changed. It lost the sweetness and became sharp, practical, and cruel. That is exactly why you should take the shift, Zora. Dad told me you were making a scene about your loan payments last night. You are broke. The overtime pay for a Saturday night trauma shift is double time. You really need the money, don't you? The air left my lungs. She was not asking for a favor. She was throwing my poverty in my face. She was weaponizing the very disadvantage our parents had created to make me serve her. Consider it me doing you a favor, she continued breezily. I am basically handing you $1,000. You can put it toward that terrifying interest payment. Besides, you don't have plans. It is not like you have a boyfriend to go home to. I have a fiancé and a mother-in-law to impress. I sat there in my cold apartment staring at the water stains on the ceiling. I hated her. In that moment, I hated her with a clarity that was terrifying. But I hated my bank balance more. She had me trapped, and she knew it. Fine, I said, my voice flat. I will take the shift. But tell Dr. Silva yourself. I am not lying for you. You are a lifesaver, she squealed. I knew you would be sensible. You are always the sturdy one, Zora. Love you, mean it. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and looked at the black screen. Sturdy. There was that word again. It meant I was a tool, an object to be used until it broke. I got up and walked to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. I looked at my reflection. My eyes were bloodshot. I looked 10 years older than I was. I would take the shift. I would take her money. But I was done being sturdy. I was going to be dangerous. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room hummed with a frequency that seemed to vibrate directly against my skull. It was hour 11 of the shift Chloe was supposed to be working. My legs felt like lead pipes and my hands were trembling from a combination of caffeine overdose and caloric deficit. I was leaning against the nurse's station, trying to summon the energy to chart a patient with a kidney stone, when the red trauma light started flashing. Trauma Bay 1. The charge nurse shouted. Gunshot wound to the chest. Hypotensive, tachycardic. ETA, 2 minutes. I pushed off the desk, my body moving on muscle memory alone. That was supposed to be Chloe's patient. If she were here, she would be the one rushing to the bay. But she was not here. She was drinking champagne. I was here. The paramedics burst through the doors wheeling a stretcher that was slick with blood. The patient was a young man, barely 20, gasping for air, his eyes wide with terror. I stepped up to the table, my mind snapping into focus, pushing aside the exhaustion. I need a chest tube tray stat, I yelled, grabbing a scalpel. He is tensioning. We need to decompress now. The next 30 minutes were a blur of controlled violence. I sliced through skin and muscle, ignoring the spray of blood that hit my gown. I forced the plastic tube between his ribs, feeling the resistance of the intercostal muscle. Then the sudden release, as air hissed out and blood poured into the collection chamber. His vitals stabilized, but only for a second. He is coding, the nurse screamed. Start compressions. I ordered, jumping onto the step stool. I took over the rhythm, pressing down on his chest, feeling ribs crack under my hands. Come on, I gritted out, sweat stinging my eyes. Do not die on me, not tonight. We fought for him. For 20 minutes we pushed drugs, shocked his heart, and breathed for him. My arms burned. Dark spots danced in my vision. I felt the room tilt sideways, my knees buckling. I locked them, forcing myself to stay upright. I could not collapse. If I went down, he died. Finally, a rhythm appeared on the monitor. Beep, beep, beep. We have a pulse, the nurse breathed out. I stepped back, ripping off my gloves, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I grabbed the counter to keep from sliding to the floor. The room spun violently. I closed my eyes, counting to 3, willing the nausea to pass. I had saved him. I had done the job Chloe was too busy to do. I stumbled into the break room and collapsed onto the vinyl sofa. My phone lit up on the table, a notification from Instagram. Doctors need rest too, the caption read. I opened it. It was a video. Chloe was in a bridal suite holding a crystal flute of amber liquid surrounded by her bridesmaids. She looked fresh, happy, and completely unburdened. She blew a kiss to the camera. Thanks to the best big sis for covering my shift so I could have this moment. Family first. I stared at the blood drying on my scrubs. Family first. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. She was celebrating her life while I was nearly killing myself to save the lives she abandoned. I let the phone drop from my hand. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She wanted the glory. Fine. But she was going to pay for it. I sat on the lumpy mattress in the on-call room, the smell of antiseptic and stale coffee filling my nose. My body ached from the adrenaline crash of the trauma code I had just run. I looked down at my hands. They were raw from scrubbing the skin dry and cracked. These were the hands that had just saved a life. These were the hands that my family thought were only good for carrying their burdens. My phone buzzed on the metal bedside table. The screen lit up, cutting through the dim light. I stared at it, a knot forming in my stomach. Was it Chloe again? Did she need me to pick up her dry cleaning now? Or was it the bank telling me I was overdrawn again? I almost did not check it. I almost rolled over and closed my eyes, letting the exhaustion take me. But a strange instinct, a pull I could not explain, made me reach out. I unlocked the screen. It was not a text, it was an email. The sender name made my breath hitch. MedTech Innovations. I froze. I had submitted the patent application for my microsurgical suturing device 6 months ago, working on the prototypes in the hospital lab during the few hours I was not working or sleeping. I had sent it off into the void, a desperate Hail Mary, hoping it might eventually bring in enough to pay off a fraction of my loans. I tapped the notification. The subject line read, "Update regarding patent application, final review, complete." My heart hammered against my ribs louder than the hum of the ventilation system. I opened the message. Dear Dr. Brooks, we are pleased to inform you that the Technical Review Board has completed its assessment of your proprietary microsurgical device. The innovation represents a significant leap forward in vascular reconstruction technology. Based on our market analysis and projected application across neurosurgery and cardiac fields, we are prepared to move forward with an immediate acquisition offer. Our preliminary valuation places the asset in the mid-8-figure range. I stopped reading. I blinked, sure that the exhaustion was making me hallucinate. I looked at the numbers again. Mid-8 figures. That meant tens of millions, 15 million, maybe 20. I dropped the phone onto the blanket. The room went silent. The sounds of the hospital outside the door faded away. $15 million. I looked around the cramped, ugly room. I looked at my cheap, worn-out sneakers. I thought about the instant noodles waiting for me at home. I thought about my father's smug face as he handed Chloe that check. I thought about my mother telling me I was sturdy. A sound escaped my throat. It was a laugh, but it broke into a sob. I doubled over, burying my face in my hands. The tears came hot and fast, soaking my palms. I cried until my chest hurt. I cried until I was gasping for air. But these were not tears of despair. They were not tears of grief. They were tears of relief so profound it felt physical. The weight that had been crushing me, the mountain of debt, the fear of the future, the dependency on a family that despised me, it was all gone, vaporized in a single instant. I was not just a struggling resident anymore. I was a millionaire. I was a tycoon. I was free. I sat up and wiped my face with the rough sheet. I picked up the phone again and read the email one more time just to be sure. It was real. It was mine. And the best part was, they did not know. My father with his conditional love, my mother with her cruelty, Chloe with her entitlement. None of them knew. I was holding a winning lottery ticket, and they were treating me like a beggar. A cold, fierce joy spread through me. I would not tell them, not yet. I would let them keep treating me like dirt. I would let them dig their hole deeper and deeper. And when the time was right, when they were standing on top of their pile of lies and arrogance, I would pull the rug out from under them. I replied to the email with shaking fingers. Thank you. I am available to discuss next steps. I hit send. I stood up, smoothed down my scrubs, and walked to the door. I was still tired. I was still hungry. But as I walked back out onto the floor, I felt like I was walking on air. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of lukewarm coffee when I saw them. My mother, Patricia, and my father, David, were weaving through the tables of tired doctors and anxious families like royalty visiting a soup kitchen. For a split second, a foolish, dangerous part of me sparked with hope. Had they come to check on me? Had they realized that forcing me to work a double shift after storming out of dinner was cruel? My mother spotted me and waved her diamond bracelet, catching the harsh fluorescent light. Zora, there you are. We have been looking everywhere for you. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask about the trauma code I had run, or the dark circles under my eyes. She just pulled out a chair and sat down, placing her designer handbag on the sticky table with a grimace. My father sat opposite me, looking at his watch. We do not have much time, Zora. We have a meeting with the wedding planner at 2. We need you to sign something. He slid a folder across the table. I looked at it, then at them. What is this? It is a loan application, my mother said breezily. For Chloe. She needs a new car. I blinked, trying to process the absurdity of the statement. Chloe drives a 2-year-old Mercedes. It is perfectly fine. It is not fine, Zora. My mother lowered her voice, leaning in conspiratorially. Brad's mother made a comment about it yesterday. She said it looked tired. Chloe cannot pull up to the country club in a tired car. She is going to be a doctor's wife. She needs a Range Rover. It fits the aesthetic of the wedding. And you want me to pay for it? I asked, my voice flat. No, of course not. My father scoffed. We are making the payments, but our debt-to-income ratio is currently a bit high because we paid off her student loans. The bank requires a co-signer with pristine credit. Since you have not bought a house or a decent car, your credit is excellent. We just need your signature. I stared at them. The audacity was breathtaking. They had drained their resources to give her a free ride, and now they wanted to leverage my financial struggle to fund her luxury. They wanted me to risk my credit score, the only thing I had managed to protect, so she could drive a car worth more than my entire education. You want me to take on the risk, I said slowly. If you miss a payment, it hits my credit. If she totals it, it hits my insurance history. We would never miss a payment, my mother said, offended. We are family, Zora. This is what families do. We help each other. Besides, it is just a signature. It costs you nothing. You should be honored to help your sister maintain her standing. She is under so much pressure to fit in with Brad's family. You have no idea how hard it is for her. Hard. I laughed, a dry cracking sound. Hard is working 30 hours straight. Hard is eating ramen because I am saving for loan payments. Hard is knowing your parents think you are nothing more than a wallet and a workhorse. I pushed the folder back. No. My father's face turned a dark, ugly red. Excuse me. I said no. Dad, I am not signing. If Chloe wants a Range Rover, she can buy it herself. Or you can buy it. But leave my credit out of it. I have my own debts to worry about, remember, since you decided I was the sturdy one. You are being spiteful, my mother hissed. This is jealousy, plain and simple. You cannot stand to see your sister happy. You want to sabotage her because you are miserable. Just sign the damn paper, Zora. Do not make us make you. Make me! I stood up my chair, scraping loudly. How are you going to make me, Dad? Are you going to cut me off? You already did. Are you going to stop loving me? You never started. I am done. Get out of my hospital before I call security. I walked away, leaving them sitting there with their unsigned papers and their open mouths. I felt lightheaded, but it wasn't from exhaustion. It was the rush of finally saying no. I did not make it 5 steps before my mother's hand clamped around my upper arm like a vice. Her nails dug into my skin through the thin fabric of my scrubs. She yanked me back so hard I nearly lost my footing. I spun around expecting to see embarrassment on her face for causing a scene. Instead, I saw pure, unadulterated rage. Her eyes were wide and manic, her chest heaving beneath her silk blouse. "You do not walk away from me, Zora," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Get back to that table and sign the papers. Do not make me tell you again." I pulled my arm free, rubbing the spot where her nails had left crescent-shaped indentations. I said, "No, Mom. I am not signing. I am not ruining my financial future so Chloe can play pretend princess. If she wants a luxury car, she can get a job that pays for it." That was the breaking point. The veneer of the polite society matron cracked and fell away. My mother raised her hand and swung. The slap connected with my cheek with a wet, sharp crack that echoed off the linoleum floors and high ceilings of the hospital atrium. My head snapped to the side. A shock of pain radiated through my jaw and up into my ear. The bustling noise of the hospital died instantly. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The clatter of silverware ceased. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. I slowly turned my head back to face her. My cheek throbbed hot and angry. My mother stood there, her hands still raised slightly, her breathing ragged. She did not look sorry. She looked justified. "You selfish, ungrateful little witch," she screamed, not caring who heard her now. "You want to humiliate us, don't you? You want your sister to drive up to the Sterling estate in a piece of trash. You want her to look like a pauper in front of her new family. Is that it? You are so consumed by your own jealousy that you would sabotage her happiness just to make a point." I looked around. Dr. Silva was standing near the coffee cart, his mouth slightly open, holding a chart. Two of the nurses I had worked the trauma shift with were staring from the doorway, their eyes wide with shock. A group of medical students I supervised were watching from a corner table. The humiliation washed over me, cold and suffocating. My mother had just assaulted me in my workplace, in the one place where I commanded respect, where I was Dr. Brooks, not just the disappointing daughter. I touched my cheek, my fingers coming away trembling. I looked at my father. He was still sitting at the table, but he wasn't moving to stop her. He was watching, his eyes cold and hard, as if I deserved it, as if I had forced her hand. I straightened my spine. I forced my hands to drop to my sides. I would not cry. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. "You have made your point, Patricia," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "You have shown everyone exactly who you are. And now I am going to show you who I am. I am not your doormat. I am not your cosigner. And I am certainly not your daughter anymore. Sign the papers," she spat, stepping toward me again, raising her hand as if to strike me a second time. I did not flinch. "Go ahead," I dared her. "Hit me again. Do it in front of the chief of surgery. Do it in front of the security cameras. See what happens." She froze, her hand hovering in the air. She looked around, realizing for the first time that she had an audience. She saw Dr. Silva stepping forward, his face thunderous. She saw the security guard reaching for his radio. She lowered her hand, smoothing her skirt with a jerky, nervous motion. "You will regret this, Zora," she whispered, her voice dripping with venom. "When you come crawling back to us, when you need family, we will remember this. We will remember that you chose money over your sister." I looked her dead in the eye. "I did not choose money. I chose me. Now get out of my hospital before I have you arrested for assault." I sat in the locker room, pressing a bag of frozen peas against my cheek. The cold numbed the throbbing skin, but it did nothing for the burning humiliation that was still coursing through my veins. My mother had slapped me. In my hospital. In front of my colleagues. And she had walked away feeling justified because I refused to finance their delusion. My hands were still shaking, not from fear anymore, but from a rage so pure and hot, it felt like it could melt steel. My phone vibrated against the metal bench, making a harsh rattling sound that echoed in the empty room. I knew who it was before I even looked. It was not an apology. It was not a check-in. It was the escalation. I picked up the phone. A string of text messages from Chloe lit up the screen. You really messed up this time, Zora. Mom is hysterical. She is in the car crying because you were so aggressive with her. I cannot believe you would treat our mother like that, especially when she is just trying to help me. You need to fix this. I stared at the words, my vision blurring slightly. Help her. They wanted me to sign a loan that would cripple me financially, and they called it help. I started to type a response to tell her exactly where she could shove her loan application, but another message popped up. Brad is asking what happened. He knows something is wrong because Mom called him crying. I am thinking about telling him the truth, Zora. I am thinking about telling him that the reason you are so difficult, the reason you won't help us, is because you are in love with him. I dropped the phone on the bench as if it had turned into a snake. I stared at it, my mouth falling open. She was going to lie to her fiancé. She was going to frame my refusal to be exploited as some twisted romantic jealousy. It was sick. It was a level of manipulation I had not thought even she was capable of. The phone buzzed again. Imagine how awkward the wedding will be if Brad thinks you are obsessing over him. Imagine what his mother, Mrs. Sterling, will think of you. The jealous spinster sister trying to sabotage the bride because she wants the groom. It would be so embarrassing for you, Zora. Everyone would pity you. But I can fix it. Just sign the papers for the car. If you sign, I will tell Brad it was just a misunderstanding about schedules. I will tell him you were tired. I will protect your reputation. But if you don't sign, I tell him everything. I read the threat 3 times. She was blackmailing me. She was threatening to destroy my reputation and humiliate me in front of hundreds of people just to get a Range Rover. This was not a sister. This was a predator. I picked up the phone. I did not type a reply. I did not try to reason with her. There was no reasoning with a terrorist. I went to her contact card. I scrolled down to the bottom. My thumb hovered over the red text that said, "Block caller." For a second, I hesitated. It felt permanent. It felt like cutting off a limb. But then I touched my cheek where my mother had hit me. I remembered the feeling of being sturdy. I remembered the $15 million waiting for me in my inbox. I am not jealous of you, Chloe, I whispered to the empty room. I am rich, and you are a parasite. I pressed block. The messages disappeared. The silence that followed was the sweetest thing I had ever heard. I sat there for a long time watching the ice melt in the bag dripping onto the floor. I was alone. I had no family. I had a red mark on my face and a hole in my heart. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. Let her tell Brad whatever she wanted. Let her spin her lies. I had the truth. And soon I would have the money to make sure the truth was the only thing that mattered. I stood up, tossed the ice pack in the trash, and walked out of the locker room. I had a patent to sell. 2 days later, I walked into the glass-walled office of Dr. Harrison. He was a former neurosurgeon turned patent attorney, and he was the only person in the world who knew what I was really worth. I was wearing my only suit, which I had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. It smelled faintly of mothballs, but I held my head high. The red mark on my cheek where my mother had slapped me was fading into a yellowish bruise, which I had tried to cover with drugstore concealer. Harrison did not stare at it, but I saw his eyes flicker. He knew I was a resident. He probably assumed it was a patient assault. He had no idea it was a maternal one. "Please, sit down, Dr. Brooks," he said, gesturing to a leather chair that probably cost more than my car. "I have reviewed the term sheet from MedTech Innovations. It is aggressive. They want exclusive rights, global distribution, and immediate transfer of intellectual property. In exchange, they are offering a lump sum buyout." I sat down, my hands folded in my lap to hide the tremors. I did not want to negotiate points. I did not want royalties spread out over 20 years. I needed ammunition. I looked him in the eye. "What is the bottom line number?" Harrison adjusted his glasses. $15 million. The room spun for a second. 15 million. It was enough to buy the hospital. It was enough to buy my parents' house 10 times over. It was enough to bury Chloe in her own envy. I want to sell, I said, my voice steady. But I have conditions. Harrison opened his notebook, pen poised. Go on. I need liquidity. I need a significant portion of that cash accessible within 48 hours of signing. I cannot wait for quarterly disbursements. I have debts to settle and I have investments I need to make immediately. He looked up, surprised. That is unusual, Zora. Usually we structure this for tax purposes over several years. I do not care about the taxes, I said, leaning forward. I care about speed. I am in a situation where financial independence is a matter of survival. I need to buy back my freedom, Dr. Harrison. And I need to do it before my family realizes I am not the helpless little girl they think I am. Harrison studied me for a long moment. He saw the bruise on my face. He saw the fraying cuffs of my jacket. Then he saw the fire in my eyes. He nodded slowly, closing the folder. I will tell them we accept the valuation contingent on an expedited closing and an immediate wire transfer of funds. If they want this technology bad enough, they will play ball. And trust me, Dr. Brooks, they want it bad. Good, I said, standing up. Get it done. Call me when the money is real. I walked out of that office, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a shark. 1 week later, the hospital pager buzzed against my hip with a violence that made me jump. It was a 911 code from the 4th floor internal medicine. That was Chloe's rotation. I ran up the stairs, skipping the slow elevator, my heart pounding, not with worry for her, but with the dread of what mess I would find. When I burst through the double doors, I expected to see a cardiac arrest or a seizure. Instead, I saw my sister huddled in the corner of the nurse's station, shaking so hard her stethoscope was rattling against her chest. She looked up at me, her face streaked with mascara. Her eyes were wide with terror. Zora, you have to help me. I think I killed him. I grabbed her shoulders and pulled her into the empty medication room, kicking the door shut. What did you do, Chloe? Talk to me. She was gasping for air, hyperventilating, clutching my scrub top. I gave Mr. Henderson the insulin. But I misread the chart. It said 10 units. I gave him 100. I pushed the whole vial. I checked the chart later and realized. He is crashing, Zora. His sugar is bottoming out. If he dies, I am done. The board will revoke my license. Brad will leave me. My life is over. I did not waste time yelling. I ran to the patient's room. Mr. Henderson was diaphoretic and unresponsive, his skin cold and clammy. I ordered the nurse to push D50 immediately. We stabilized him. It was close. Too close. Once his vitals leveled out, I walked back to the medication room where Chloe was still hiding. She was not checking on her patient. She was checking her makeup in her compact mirror, trying to fix the damage the tears had done. She looked at me, hope replacing the fear. Is he okay? Did you fix it? I nodded slowly, my hand slipping into my pocket. He is stable, no thanks to you. You were reckless, Chloe. How could you make a mistake that basic? She sniffled, wiping her nose on her sleeve. I was distracted, okay? The wedding planner kept texting me about the centerpieces. I just glanced at the chart. I didn't mean to. You have to cover for me, Zora. You have to sign the chart. If my name is on that error report, I am ruined. Please. Just this one last time. Be the big sister. I felt the cool metal of my phone in my pocket. I had turned on the voice memo app the moment I walked into the room. I looked at her. Say that again, Chloe. Tell me exactly why you almost killed a man. She didn't even hesitate. She was so used to me being her safety net she didn't see the trap. I told you I was planning the wedding. I was on the phone with the florist. I just guessed the dosage. It was an accident. But you fixed it right, so no one needs to know. Just sign the chart, Zora. Please. I looked at the phone recording silently in my pocket. I had it. Admission of gross negligence. Admission of prioritizing a party over a human life. I looked at my sister. She wasn't a doctor. She was a liability. I didn't sign the chart. I didn't say yes. I just turned around and walked out, leaving her alone in that cold, sterile room. I had the recording, and now I had the power. The invitation to the Sterling estate was not an olive branch, it was a summons to perform. We were sitting in the back of my father's BMW, the leather interior smelling of his expensive cologne and my mother's nervous sweat. We were on our way to meet Brad's parents for the first time. The Sterlings were not just rich, they were dynasty wealthy. They had libraries named after them, and politicians in their contacts list. My mother Patricia was vibrating with anxiety, checking her makeup in the visor mirror for the 10th time. She turned around to look at me, her eyes narrowing as she assessed my appearance. I was wearing a gray wool dress that I had bought at a discount store 5 years ago. It was shapeless, the fabric had started to pill under the arms, and the color washed me out completely. I had a closet full of designer clothes now hidden in the back of my studio apartment, paid for with the initial patent advance, but I could not wear them. My mother had been very specific instructions. Wear something modest, Zora, she had said on the phone yesterday. We do not want you to look like you are trying too hard. Chloe needs to shine tonight. You know how she gets insecure. Just be the supportive big sister. Chloe sat next to me looking like a princess from a fairy tale. She was wearing a cream-colored silk dress that draped perfectly over her frame. Her hair was blown out to glossy perfection, and the 3-carat diamond on her finger caught the passing streetlights flashing dazzling prisms around the car. She looked expensive. She looked cherished. I looked like her maid. You look fine. Zora, my father said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his tone dismissive. Respectable but simple. It is good. It shows the contrast. We want the Sterlings to see that Chloe comes from a good family, but that she is the exceptional one, the diamond in the rough. You are the rough. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. They were using me as a prop. I was the foil designed to make the golden child shine brighter. They wanted the Sterlings to think Chloe was a miracle of nature who had risen above her mediocre gene pool. Just try not to talk too much, my mother added as we pulled up to the massive wrought iron gates of the Sterling estate. If they ask about your work, just say it is hard and you are tired. Do not bore them with medical jargon. Chloe is going to tell them about her dermatology residency. It is much more refined than trauma surgery. And for God's sake, do not mention your loans. We told them both our daughters are financially stable. We do not want them to think we have baggage. We rolled up the long driveway lined with ancient oaks that looked like they had been standing since the Civil War. The house was a mansion, a sprawling stone beast that looked like it belonged in the English countryside. Valets in uniforms opened our doors. I stepped out, smoothing my cheap, scratchy dress. I looked at my sister, who was already putting on her best damsel-in-distress face for the waiting staff. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging in slightly. "Do not embarrass me, Zora," she hissed under her breath so our parents would not hear. "Brad's mother is intense. If you mess this up for me, I will never forgive you. Just sit there and be quiet." I looked at her then, at the massive house that loomed over us like a judgment. I smiled a small, tight smile that did not reach my eyes. "Don't worry, Chloe," I said softly. "I wouldn't dream of it. I am just here to play my part." I walked up the marble steps behind them, my head high. They thought I was the background character in their movie. They had no idea I was writing the ending. The dining room at the Sterling estate was silent enough to hear a pin drop on the Persian rug. We were seated at a mahogany table that was longer than my entire apartment. The place settings were elaborate, with more forks than I knew what to do with, and crystal goblets that caught the candlelight. I sat at the far end of the table in my pilling gray dress, trying to make myself as small as possible. My mother kept shooting me warning glares every time I reached for my water glass, as if my hydration was an act of aggression. Chloe was seated next to Brad, glowing in the candlelight, laughing a little too loudly at everything his father said. She was playing the part of the perfect debutante doctor, but I could see the strain around her eyes. She was out of her depth, and she knew it. Mrs. Sterling sat at the head of the table. She was a woman who did not have to raise her voice to command a room. She wore pearls that were real and a smile that was fake. She had been watching Chloe all night with a gaze that was polite, but dissecting. She turned to my sister, her expression unreadable. "So Chloe, Brad tells me you are specializing in dermatology. That must be fascinating." I was just reading an article in the New England Journal of Medicine about the new immunotherapies for melanoma. It is remarkable how targeted the treatments have become. Do you think the PD-1 inhibitors are going to replace traditional chemotherapy entirely? The table went quiet. It was a test. A subtle intellectual litmus test wrapped in dinner conversation. Chloe froze. Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth. I saw panic flare in her eyes. She had barely scraped by in medical school. She knew how to inject Botox, and she knew how to upsell skin creams, but she did not read medical journals. She probably did not even know what a PD-1 inhibitor was. She laughed a high-pitched, nervous sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Mrs. Sterling, you know how it is. The science is always changing. I think the most important thing is just making sure the patient feels beautiful. Confidence is the best medicine, right? Besides, cancer is so depressing. I prefer to focus on the happy side of medicine, like glowing skin." The silence that followed was excruciating. Mrs. Sterling did not smile. She just stared at Chloe as if my sister had just offered to perform surgery with a spoon. My father cleared his throat loudly, trying to fill the void. "Well, Chloe has always been very people-oriented," he stammered. "She has a great bedside manner. I could not help it. I physically could not stop myself. The stupidity was suffocating me." "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the awkward tension like a scalpel, "the data on PD-1 inhibitors is promising, but it is not a replacement yet. The response rates are high in certain genetic markers, but for patients with autoimmune conditions, the side effect profile is still too risky to abandon chemotherapy completely. It is about integrating the therapies, not replacing them." Every head at the table snapped toward me. My mother looked like she wanted to reach across the centerpiece and strangle me. Chloe looked furious, but Mrs. Sterling looked at me for the first time all night, really looked at me. Her eyes narrowed, but not with malice, with interest. "Is that so?" she asked, ignoring Chloe completely. "And what is your opinion on the resistance mechanisms?" I sat up straighter, ignoring my father's foot kicking me under the table. "Tumor microenvironment," I said simply. "The T cells get exhausted. Unless we can figure out how to modulate the metabolic environment of the tumor, the inhibitors eventually stop working." That is actually what my research was on before I started my neurosurgery residency. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was not awkward. It was stunned. Mrs. Sterling slowly lowered her wine glass. "Neurosurgery," she repeated. "I thought your mother said you were a nurse." I looked at my mother, who had turned a pale shade of gray. "She must have misspoken," I said, holding Mrs. Sterling's gaze. "I am the chief resident in neurosurgery at Atlanta General." "And I read the journals." Brad shifted in his seat, turning his body away from Chloe and toward me. It was a subtle movement, but at that table, it felt like a seismic shift. For the first time all night, the golden boy wasn't looking at the golden child. He was looking at the help. "You developed a research protocol for tumor microenvironments?" he asked, his voice dropping the polite dinner party cadence and taking on a genuine curiosity. "That sounds incredibly complex. I read a prospectus on biotech startups last week that mentioned similar hurdles in vascular reconstruction. Is that part of your residency work?" I felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth in my chest. It was the feeling of being seen, not as a prop, not as a wallet, but as an intellect. "Actually," I said, ignoring the way my mother was practically vibrating with rage across from me, "it started as a side project during my internship. The vascular reconstruction techniques we currently use are archaic. They rely on manual dexterity that has a high failure rate in deep fields. I designed a prototype for a microsurgical suturing device that automates the knot integrity. It reduces the procedure time by 40%. Brad's eyes widened. You built a prototype. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the pristine tablecloth. That is brilliant, Zora. Is it proprietary? Have you looked into patenting it? I opened my mouth to answer, to tell him that not only had I looked into it, but I had just sold it for enough money to buy his parents' house. But a sharp kick under the table silenced me. Chloe was glaring at me, her eyes narrowed into slits. Her face was a mask of panic and fury. She was losing the room. She was losing the narrative. Her perfect doctor facade was crumbling because she couldn't keep up with the conversation, and her fiancé was fascinated by the sister she had spent years calling stupid. Babe, Chloe whined, reaching out to touch Brad's arm, her long nails digging into his suit jacket. This is so boring. Nobody wants to talk about blood and guts at dinner. You promised we could discuss the honeymoon. I was thinking Bora Bora. Brad didn't even look at her. In a minute, Chloe. This is important. Zora, if you have a working prototype, you are sitting on a gold mine. My family invests in medical technology. If you ever need an introduction or advice on how to protect your IP, you should let me know. That was the breaking point. The idea that I might have something valuable, something that Brad respected, something that didn't involve her, was too much for Chloe to handle. She reached for the heavy crystal decanter of Cabernet Sauvignon that was sitting between us. Her hand moved fast. Too fast to be an accident. She didn't pour it. She swiped it. Oops, she shrieked. The bottle tipped. A dark red wave of expensive wine crashed into my chest. It soaked instantly into the cheap gray wool of my dress, spreading like a gunshot wound across my torso. The cold liquid seeped through to my skin, dripping into my lap, ruining the only professional outfit I had left. Oh my God, Zora! Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in a performance that would have been comical if I wasn't wet and sticky. Look what you did. You were gesturing so wildly with your hands, you knocked the bottle right out of my grip. You are so clumsy. My mother gasped, standing up and grabbing a napkin. Zora, honestly, you are making a mess of Mrs. Sterling's tablecloth. Get up. Go clean yourself up before you ruin the chair, too. I sat there for a second, the wine dripping off my chin. I looked at Brad, who looked horrified. I looked at Mrs. Sterling, who looked displeased, not at me, but at the obvious theater of it all. And I looked at Chloe. She wasn't sorry. Behind her hand, she was smirking. She had reclaimed the center of attention. She had turned me back into the messy, embarrassing sister. I am so sorry, Mrs. Sterling, I said, standing up, my dignity shredding along with my dress. Please excuse me. Go on. My father barked, waving his hand at me as if I were a stray dog. Fix this, Zora. You are embarrassing your sister. I turned and walked out of the dining room, the heavy wet wool clinging to my legs. I heard Chloe giggle behind me, a light tinkling sound. Sorry, Brad, she purred. Zora just gets so excited when people pay attention to her. She doesn't know how to act in nice places. I walked into the opulent bathroom and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a disaster. But as I dabbed at the stain, I caught my own eye. They thought they had won. They thought they had put me back in my place. But Brad knew. Mrs. Sterling knew. And I knew. The wine would wash out. But the fear I saw in Chloe's eyes, that was permanent. I was standing at the marble sink, dabbing at the wine stain with a plush monogrammed towel, when the door flew open. It hit the wall with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Chloe marched in, her face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly hatred. She did not look like a blushing bride-to-be. She looked like a cornered animal. She slammed the lock shut and spun on me. What do you think you are doing? She hissed. Her voice was shaking, not with sorrow, but with a rage so intense it made the veins in her neck bulge. I am cleaning up the wine you threw at me, I said calmly, not even looking at her. I dipped the towel in cold water again. It is going to stain. Mom is going to be furious about the dry cleaning bill. Do not play dumb with me, Zora, she screamed, stepping into my personal space. I saw what you were doing out there. Flirting with Brad, trying to impress his mother with your little medical facts. You are so pathetic. Do you really think he would ever look at you? Look at yourself. You are wearing a rag. You look like a librarian who got lost. I stopped scrubbing. I looked up and met her eyes in the mirror. I wasn't flirting, Chloe. I was having an intellectual conversation. You should try it sometime. It might help you pass your boards next time without my help. Her face went crimson. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the wet wool. Listen to me, you jealous, bitter failure. Brad is mine. This life is mine. You are just the help. You are the ugly sister who pays the bills and shuts up. Do not ever try to upstage me again. Know your place, Zora. You are nothing. You are nobody. You are just a wallet with a pulse. I looked down at her hand on my arm. Then I looked at her face. For the first time, I did not see the golden child. I saw a fraud. A terrified, incompetent fraud who knew she was one bad day away from being exposed. I laughed. It was a soft, cold sound that made her let go of me, as if I were hot iron. You are shaking, Chloe, I observed quietly. Why are you so scared? Is it because Brad realized I am smarter than you? Or is it because you know that without Mom and Dad's money, you are just a mediocre student in a designer dress? Shut up, she spat. I am the winner here. I have the ring. I have the check. You have nothing. I leaned in close to her. Be very careful with that mouth, little sister, I whispered. You think you are standing on solid ground, but you are standing on a trap door. And I am the one holding the lever. Go back out there. Smile for the cameras. Play the happy bride. But remember this moment. Remember that I saw you panic. Because soon panic is going to be the only thing you have left. I tossed the wine-stained towel into the hamper and walked past her. She stood there freezing in the middle of the bathroom, trembling in her expensive silk gown. She did not say another word. I unlocked the door and stepped back out into the hallway. The game had changed. She thought she was fighting for a husband. She had no idea she was fighting for her life. It was 11:30 at night when the pounding started on my door. I was sitting on my second-hand couch nursing a cup of tea and trying to scrub the red wine stain out of my mind, if not my dress. I looked through the peephole expecting a neighbor complaining about noise, but instead I saw my parents. David and Patricia standing in the dim hallway of my apartment complex, looking like royalty visiting a dungeon. My father was checking his watch impatiently, and my mother was holding a tissue to her nose as if the very air in my building was toxic. I opened the door, keeping the chain on. What are you doing here? It is midnight. We need to talk, Zora. My father said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Open the door. It is a family matter. I undid the chain and let them in. They walked into my tiny living room, their eyes scanning the peeling paint and the mismatched furniture with open disdain. My mother refused to sit down, pulling her mink coat tighter around her, as if she might catch poverty if she let it touch the upholstery. My father pulled a thick, legal envelope from his jacket pocket and tossed it onto my coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud right next to my stack of unpaid bills. We need you to sign this, he said without preamble. Tonight. I looked at the envelope, then at him. What is it? It is a quitclaim deed, my mother said, stepping forward. For Big Mama's house in Savannah. We found a buyer. A developer wants to tear it down and build condos. The offer is substantial. Since your name is on the deed alongside ours because of that ridiculous clause in her will, we need your signature to close the deal. I felt the blood drain from my face. Big Mama's house. The house where I had spent every summer. The house where I had actually felt loved. You want to sell Big Mama's house. You want to tear it down. Why? Because weddings are expensive, Zora, my father snapped. The venue deposit was higher than we anticipated. The flowers alone are $50,000. And the Sterling's expecting a level of hospitality that we have to meet. We are cash poor right now. We need the equity from that old shack to cover the rest of the budget. Old shack, I whispered. That house has been in our family for 3 generations. Big Mama made me promise we would never sell it. She said it was our history. History does not pay for catering, my mother cut in her voice sharp. Chloe deserves a perfect day. She deserves to start her life without financial worry. We are doing this for her. And honestly, Zora, what do you care? You never go down there. It is just sitting there rotting. You are being sentimental and selfish. Just sign the papers so we can get the wire transfer by Monday. I looked at the document. I looked at the pen my father was holding out to me. They were willing to bulldoze our heritage to pay for a party. They were willing to erase the one place where I had felt safe just so Chloe could have imported orchids. I reached for the envelope slowly. My hands were cold. I opened it and pretended to read the legal jargon. But I wasn't reading. I was calculating. If they were desperate enough to sell the house at midnight, they were hiding something else. There was a desperation in their eyes that didn't match the arrogance in their voices. I need to read this over, I said calmly. I am not signing anything tonight without reviewing the terms. My father took a step toward me, his face darkening. Do not play games, Zora. We do not have time for your little power plays. The buyer needs an answer tomorrow morning. Sign it. No, I said. I stood up facing him. Leave it here. I will look at it. If everything is in order, I will bring it to you tomorrow. But I am not signing my birthright away at midnight because you overspent on appetizers. Get out of my house. They stared at me, shocked by my defiance. My mother looked like she wanted to scream, but she saw the look in my eye and stopped. Fine, my father spat. Tomorrow. Noon. Do not be late. And do not think about asking for a cut. This money is for the family, not for you. They slammed the door behind them. I locked it and leaned against the wood, my heart racing. I picked up the document. I turned to the page with the signatures. And that was when I saw it. The date on the notary stamp was from 2 years ago. And next to the line for the primary mortgage holder was a signature that looked exactly like mine, but I had never signed it. They weren't just asking me to sell the house. They were trying to cover up the fact that they had already leveraged it. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the silence they had left behind. The heavy envelope lay on the coffee table like a dormant bomb. My parents had been so urgent, so desperate. They wanted me to sign a quit-claim deed to release my interest in Big Mama's house so they could sell it to a developer. They said they needed the equity for the wedding. But their desperation felt wrong. It was too frantic for just a venue deposit. I reached out and pulled the documents toward me. I turned on the lamp beside the couch and began to read. I parsed through the legal jargon. Grantor. Grantee. Property description. It all looked standard until I got to the title search attached at the back. It was a summary of all liens and encumbrances on the property. There was the original mortgage which my grandmother had paid off decades ago. Then there was a blank space where the property should have been free and clear, but it wasn't. There was a new entry dated 18 months ago. Second mortgage, lender Peachtree Regional Bank. Amount $100,000. I frowned. Why would there be a mortgage on a paid-off house? My parents had said they were cash poor. They said they needed to sell the house to get money. If they had already taken out a loan against it, where did that money go? And more importantly, how did they take out a loan on a property that was jointly owned by me without my consent? I flipped to the next page. It was a copy of the loan agreement filed with the county clerk. My eyes scanned the borrower names. David Brooks, Patricia Brooks, and there at the bottom, Zora Brooks. My breath stopped. I stared at the signature line. It was my name. It was my loop on the Z, my sharp slant on the B. It looked exactly like my signature. But I had never seen this document in my life. I had never stepped foot in Peachtree Regional Bank. I had never authorized a loan. I dropped the paper as if it were burning. They had not just asked me to sell the house, they were trying to cover a crime. They had forged my signature 2 years ago to extract equity from the family home. $100,000. I did the math. That was around the time Chloe had maxed out her credit cards on a European vacation she claimed she won in a contest. That was when they had bought her the new furniture for her apartment. They had stolen my identity to fund her lifestyle. The room seemed to tilt. This was not just favoritism. This was a felony. Identity theft. Bank fraud. They had made me a co-borrower on a debt I knew nothing about. If they defaulted, the bank would come after me. It would ruin the credit I had fought so hard to build. It would destroy my security clearance for the hospital. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the city lights. They thought I was stupid. They thought I would just sign the quitclaim deed without reading the attachments. If I had signed it, the sale would have paid off this secret mortgage and the evidence of their crime would have been buried forever. They were not here to beg for my help. They were here to destroy the evidence. I walked back to the table and took a picture of the document with my phone, ensuring the forged signature was clearly visible. Then I carefully placed the papers back in the envelope. I was not going to sign the deed. I was going to use it to bury them. I pulled my laptop onto my lap and logged into my cloud storage. I needed to verify the timeline. The date on the fraudulent loan document was August 12th, 2 years ago. That date burned in my mind like a brand. I scrolled back through my text messages, searching for Chloe's name and the word debt. It did not take long. I found the thread from August 10th of that same year. Chloe had sent a string of crying face emojis followed by a message that said, "I am going to jail." I remembered that week vividly. Chloe had maxed out 5 different credit cards trying to keep up with a group of socialites she met in the Hamptons. She had spent $90,000 on designer bag shoes and a weekend rental in Montauk. She was drowning in interest payments, and collectors were calling the house. My parents had called an emergency family meeting. I sat at their dining table while Chloe sobbed about how unfair the banking system was. My father had paced the room looking grave. My mother had wrung her hands and said, "We have to fix this before it ruins her chances of finding a husband. No high-value man wants a woman with bad credit." They told me they were going to dip into their retirement savings to bail her out. They told me it was a sacrifice they were willing to make because family protects family. I had even offered to give them $5,000 from my meager savings to help, but they had waved me off, saying I needed to focus on my residency. I had felt guilty that I couldn't do more. I had felt admiration for their sacrifice. It was all a lie, a sick, twisted lie. I looked back at the loan document. The loan amount was $100,000. The disbursement date was August 14th, 2 days after the family meeting. They had not touched their retirement. They had walked into a bank, impersonated me, forged my signature, and taken out a second mortgage on the one asset that was supposed to be safe. They had stolen my identity to pay for Chloe's mistakes. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put the papers down. This was not just bad parenting. This was a felony. This was identity theft. They had leveraged my credit score, my future, and my security without my consent. If they had defaulted on this loan, the bank would not have just taken the house. They would have come after me. They would have garnished the wages I worked 80-hour weeks to earn. A foreclosure or a fraud alert on my record could have cost me my medical license. Hospitals do not hire doctors with financial liabilities. They had risked my entire career to save Chloe's credit score. They valued her ability to buy a Range Rover more than my ability to practice medicine. I looked at the signature again. It was a good forgery. Too good. My mother used to practice my signature when I was in high school to sign my permission slips because she was often too busy to look at them. She had perfected it. She had used a skill developed from neglect to commit a crime against me. I took screenshots of the texts. I downloaded the digital trail. I organized the evidence into a folder on my encrypted drive. I was not just hurt anymore, I was armed. They thought they were dealing with a daughter who could be bullied into submission. They did not realize they had just handed a loaded gun to a woman who knew exactly where to aim. I closed my laptop. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the dark listening to the city breathe and planning my next move. They wanted me to sign a quitclaim deed to hide this loan. Instead, I was going to make them eat it. I did not scream. I did not call the police. Not yet. The anger was there, hot and white, but it had crystallized into something cold and sharp. They wanted me to sign a quitclaim deed to bury their crime. If I refused, they would just forge my signature again, or find another way to circumvent me. If I confronted them now, they would gaslight me, cry, or play the victim. They would say they did it for the family. No. I needed total control. I needed to hold the leash. I looked at the bank name on the loan document. Peachtree Regional Bank. It was a mid-sized lender, likely carrying a portfolio of distressed assets. If my parents were desperate enough to sell the house at midnight to a developer, it meant they were probably behind on payments. That meant the loan was toxic. Banks hated toxic loans. They sold them for pennies on the dollar to collection agencies or to private investors. I picked up my phone. It was 2 in the morning, but I knew Harrison would be awake. He was a shark, and sharks never sleep. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert. Zora, is everything all right? It is better than all right, I said, staring at the forged signature on the coffee table. It is clear. I need you to close the deal with MedTech. Today. I do not care if we leave points on the table. I need the liquid cash in my account within 48 hours. He paused. Zora, we are negotiating for 17 million. If we rush the closing, we might drop to 15. Are you sure you want to take that hit just for speed? I am sure. 15 million is enough. But I need you to do something else for me. I need you to set up a shell company. Call it Phoenix Holdings, and then I need you to contact Peachtree Regional Bank immediately. Why Peachtree? He asked, the sound of rapid typing clicking in the background. Because they hold a second mortgage on my grandmother's house, I said, my voice flat. A mortgage obtained through fraud. My parents are the borrowers. I suspect they are in default. I want to buy the note. The typing stopped abruptly. You want to buy the debt. You want to become your parents' creditor. Exactly. I do not want to sue them, Harrison. That takes too long. Courts are slow and messy. I want to own them. If I hold the note, I control the foreclosure. I control the house. I control their fate. Buy the debt. Pay full price if you have to. Just get me that paper. Harrison let out a low whistle. Remind me never to cross you, Dr. Brooks. I will get it done. We will close the patent deal by noon tomorrow. Phoenix Holdings will be active by 2. We will approach the bank by 3. I hung up the phone. I looked at the forgery one last time before sliding it back into the envelope. I would play their game. I would stall. I would pretend to be the confused, indecisive daughter they thought I was. And while they were busy trying to manipulate me, I would be buying the ground out from under their feet. They thought they had stolen my identity. They had no idea I was about to steal their entire world. My phone lit up with a FaceTime request from Chloe. I stared at her name on the screen, feeling the phantom weight of the forged loan documents I had just locked away in my safe. I answered. Chloe filled the screen wearing a clay face mask and sipping a green smoothie. She looked relaxed. She looked like someone who did not have a care in the world because she had stolen her sister's financial identity to pay for her peace of mind. Hey Zora, she said without preamble. I need you to do something for me. I have been thinking about the reception. The wedding planner said we need a sister speech. You know, something heartwarming and tearful about how much you look up to me and how perfect Brad and I are together. I almost choked on my coffee. You want me to give a speech? After everything? Yes, Zora. It is for the aesthetic. It looks weird if my own sister does not toast me, but I do not trust you to wing it. You are always so awkward and depressing. So I want you to write it out beforehand and send it to me for approval. I want you to talk about how hard I worked in medical school. Talk about how I have this natural gift for healing. And definitely mention how I volunteer at the clinic. You went to the clinic once, Chloe, to take a selfie for your dating profile. She rolled her eyes. It is called branding, Zora. Just write the speech. Make me sound like a saint. Make me sound like the kind of doctor who saves lives and looks good doing it. And do not mention the loans. Do not mention the car. Do not mention that you tutored me. This is my moment. You are just the narrator. I looked at her pixelated face. She was so confident in her power over me, she thought I was still the sturdy doormat she could wipe her feet on. She did not know I was currently in the process of buying the debt that would swallow her whole. "I will write the speech, Chloe," I said, my voice smooth and compliant. "I will write exactly what needs to be said. I will tell everyone the truth about who you are. I will make sure there is not a dry eye in the house." She clapped her hands delightedly. "Perfect. Keep it under 3 minutes. People get bored listening to you talk. Oh, and Zora, make sure you emphasize how generous Mom and Dad have been. They really want the Sterlings to know we come from money." I hung up. I pulled a fresh notepad toward me. I picked up a pen. I wrote the header. "The truth about Dr. Chloe Brooks." I started writing. But I was not writing about her natural gift for healing. I was writing about the cheating. I was writing about the negligence. I was writing about the fraud. I was writing about the check at Le Bernardin. I was crafting a eulogy for her reputation and disguising it as a toast. She wanted a speech. I was going to give her a massacre. I sat on the edge of my mattress, the springs creaking under my weight. My laptop was balanced on my knees, the screen glowing in the dim light of my studio apartment. It was 11:59 in the morning. Harrison had promised the wire would clear by noon. I hit refresh. Nothing. I hit refresh again. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the ticking of the cheap clock on the wall. I looked around the room. The water stain on the ceiling shaped like a grimace. The stack of unpaid utility bills on the counter. The half-eaten cup of instant oatmeal that had been my dinner. This was my reality. Poverty, struggle, scarcity. Then the screen blinked. The numbers rearranged themselves. I stopped breathing. I leaned closer, squinting as if my eyes were deceiving me. But they were not. The balance was there in stark black pixels. $15 million. I counted the zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was not a glitch. It was not a dream. It was a fortune. I sat back, the air rushing out of my lungs in a shuddering gasp. 15 million. My parents had destroyed our relationship over 250,000. They had committed fraud for 100,000. They had sold their souls for pennies. And I was sitting on an empire. I touched the screen, tracing the comma. This was not just money. This was a sword. This was a shield. This was the end of being the sturdy one. This was the end of being the doormat. For the first time in my life, I did not feel the crushing weight of obligation. I felt light. I felt dangerous. I felt powerful. My phone rang. It was Harrison. I answered, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, calm and detached. "It is done, Zora," he said, his voice crisp and professional. "The funds have cleared. Phoenix Holdings is fully capitalized. I know," I said, looking at the number that changed everything. "I see it." "We have a window," he continued. "The bank holding your parents' second mortgage is looking to offload bad debt before the quarter ends. They are motivated. If we move now, we can buy the note for 80 cents on the dollar." "Buy it," I said without hesitation. "Buy it all. I want the mortgage. I want the liens. I want every piece of paper that gives them the illusion of ownership." "Consider it done," he said. "By 5 p.m. today, you will effectively own your grandmother's house, and Zora happy spending." I hung up. I looked at the apartment one last time. I would not be staying here much longer. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the tired, broke resident who begged for scraps. She was a multimillionaire. She was the owner of her abuser's fate. I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. Chloe wanted a fairy tale wedding. I was going to give her a tragedy, and I was going to pay for it in cash. I picked up the phone and dialed Harrison again. The $15 million sitting in my account was not just a number. It was fuel. It was the gasoline I was going to pour on the bridge my parents had burned. Harrison answered immediately. "We need a name for the shell company," he said. "We need to file the articles of organization within the hour if we want to move on the bank today. It needs to be something generic, something that sounds like a faceless corporate entity. Phoenix Holdings, I said. The name came to me instantly. It was not generic to me. It was a promise. I was burning down the life they had forced on me, the life of the scapegoat and the servant. And I was rising from the ash as something they could not control and could not hurt. Harrison typed in the background. Phoenix Holdings LLC, Jurisdiction Delaware. Maximum privacy. You are the sole beneficiary, but my firm will be listed as the registered agent. Your name will not appear on any public document. If your parents or anyone else tries to search the ownership, they will hit a wall of attorney-client privilege. Now about the target. He pulled up the file on the other end of the line. I could hear the rustle of papers. I have done a preliminary search on the lien. Peachtree Regional Bank holds the second mortgage on the property at 422 Oak Street. The principal balance is just under $100,000. But here is the interesting part, Zora. The loan is listed as non-performing. They are 90 days past due. I gripped the phone tighter. 90 days. They had stopped paying the mortgage 3 months ago. That was exactly when they had put the deposit down on the Ritz-Carlton for the engagement party. They were not just stealing from me. They were gambling with the house. They were letting the loan default while they threw money at florists and caterers. They were so arrogant they thought they could sell the house out from under the bank before the foreclosure notice hit. That explains the midnight visit, I said, my voice cold. They are terrified. If they do not sell the house immediately, the bank starts foreclosure proceedings. And if the bank forecloses, the fraud gets exposed. They need my signature on that quitclaim deed to cover their tracks before the house of cards collapses. Exactly, Harrison said. They are desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. Peachtree Regional will be eager to offload a toxic asset. They do not want the hassle of a foreclosure on a small residential property. If a private investment firm comes along and offers to buy the debt at face value, they will sign the papers before the ink is dry. Do it, I said. Contact the bank. Tell them Phoenix Holdings is looking to acquire a portfolio of distressed notes in the area. Bundle their mortgage with a few other small loans so it does not look targeted. Offer them full value plus 5% for an expedited assignment. I want to own that debt by the end of the week. Harrison let out a low whistle. You are paying a premium for bad debt. That is aggressive. I am not buying debt, I said. I am buying leverage. Once Phoenix Holdings owns the note, I become the creditor. I become the one who decides whether to foreclose or forgive. And I have no intention of forgiving. I want the right to demand payment in full. I want the right to inspect the original loan documents. I want to hold the paper that proves they committed a felony. I will draft the purchase agreement immediately, Harrison said. By Friday afternoon, Phoenix Holdings will be the lien holder of record. Your parents will receive a notice of assignment in the mail. They will think their loan was just sold to another bank. They will have no idea their daughter is the one holding the gavel. Get it done, Harrison. And make sure the correspondence address for Phoenix Holdings is a P.O. box in a different state. I want them chasing shadows while I am standing right behind them. I hung up the phone. I looked at the water stain on my ceiling one last time. I was not the victim anymore. I was the bank. The notification from Harrison landed in my inbox like a judge's gavel hitting the bench. Subject line: transaction complete. Attached was a 50-page PDF that represented the transfer of the mortgage note from Peachtree Regional Bank to Phoenix Holdings LLC. I opened the file, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. It was official. The bank had been all too eager to offload the delinquent loan. They had sold it for 82 cents on the dollar, happy to clear their books of a non-performing asset before the end of the fiscal quarter. I scrolled to the final page. There it was in black and white. The assignment of deed of trust. The borrower names were David and Patricia Brooks. The lender name was Phoenix Holdings. I traced the words on the screen. To the world, Phoenix Holdings was a faceless corporate entity registered in Delaware with a P.O. box in Nevada. But in reality, Phoenix Holdings was me. It was the girl they had called selfish. It was the daughter they had called sturdy. It was the sister they had robbed. I picked up my phone and called Harrison. "Is it recorded?" "It was filed with the county clerk 10 minutes ago," he confirmed, his voice sounding almost giddy. "You are officially the secured creditor, Zora. You hold the lien. If they miss one more payment or if they try to sell the property without your permission, you have the legal right to foreclose. You can take the house." I leaned back in my chair, a feeling of absolute power washing over me. It was intoxicating. For 30 years I had been at their mercy. I had begged for affection. I had begged for support. I had begged for basic respect. Now the dynamic had flipped completely. They were living in a house that I owned. They were sleeping in beds that existed only because I allowed it. Every time they walked through the front door of Big Mama's house, they were trespassing on my property, and they had absolutely no idea. "Send them the notice of assignment," I said. "Keep it standard. Just a form letter informing them that their loan has been sold to a new servicer. Do not give them a contact number. Just give them the payment address. I want them to think this is just routine banking bureaucracy. I want them to feel safe." Harrison chuckled darkly. "You are playing a long game, Zora. They are going to receive that letter and throw it on the pile of bills they aren't paying. They are too focused on the wedding to read the fine print. That is exactly what I am counting on. Let them focus on the flowers and the champagne. Let them spend every last dime they have on this party. When the time comes, I want their pockets to be empty and their options to be zero." I hung up the phone. I looked around my small apartment. It was still shabby. It still smelled like old cooking oil and damp drywall, but it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't trapped here. I was just waiting. I was a hunter sitting in a blind watching the prey graze happily in the field, unaware that the crosshairs were already locked on. They thought they had gotten away with it. They thought they had successfully stolen my inheritance and erased my future. But all they had done was hand me the deed to their destruction. I closed my laptop. It was time to get ready for a party. The courier arrived at my peeling door at 8 in the morning, wearing a uniform that cost more than my entire wardrobe. He looked at the cracked paint and the faded number on my apartment door, with visible confusion, checking his clipboard twice to make sure he had the right address. I signed for the package, my name scrawled quickly on his digital pad. It was a heavy box, wrapped in cream-colored silk ribbon, and stamped with a wax seal bearing the initials C and B, intertwined like a royal crest. I carried it into my kitchen and set it down on the laminate counter next to my burnt toast. I cut the ribbon. Inside, nestled in a bed of crushed velvet, lay a slab of thick frosted acrylic etched with gold calligraphy. It weighed at least 2 pounds. I ran my finger over the raised letters. "The Brooks family cordially invites you to the debt-free and pre-wedding celebration of Dr. Chloe Brooks and Bradley Sterling. Join us as we toast to a future unburdened by the past." I laughed out loud, a harsh barking sound in the quiet apartment. Debt-free. They were throwing a party to celebrate financial freedom while living in a house that was technically already mine because they had defaulted on a fraudulent loan. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I continued reading. The venue was the Ritz-Carlton Ballroom. The date was 2 weeks from Saturday. The dress code was strictly black tie. But it was the fine print at the bottom that made my jaw drop. "In order to support the couple as they begin their journey in their appropriate social standing, we respectfully request that all gifts be monetary or of a value no less than $1,000. Please, no boxed gifts. We are building an empire, not a kitchen." I stared at the words. Building an empire. They were begging for cash. They were so desperate for liquidity that they were charging an admission fee to their own party. They were shaking down their friends and family under the guise of exclusivity. It was tacky. It was classless. It was exactly something my mother would come up with. They needed that money to keep up appearances. They probably needed it to pay the caterer. I set the invitation down. This was it. This was the stage. They wanted a show. They wanted to parade Chloe around as the perfect, successful, debt-free doctor. They wanted to rub her golden life in everyone's faces. They wanted to pretend that the rot at the foundation of our family did not exist. They had built a glass house and invited everyone they knew to come throw stones at the poor relations. I picked up my phone and dialed Harrison. "I have the date I said. The Ritz-Carlton. 2 weeks. "Perfect," he replied. "The foreclosure notice is ready to be served. Do you want me to have the process server deliver it to their home?" "No," I said, looking at the gold leaf on the acrylic slab. "That is too private. They would just hide it. They would lie about it. I want them served somewhere they cannot hide. I want them served when they are feeling the most invincible." "You want to do it at the party?" Harrison asked, his voice filled with a mixture of shock and professional admiration. "I want to do it myself," I corrected. "I do not want a process server. I am the creditor Harrison. I own the debt. I own the house. And I own the moment. Prepare the foreclosure documents. Prepare the eviction notice. And prepare a slide deck. I am going to give a toast." I hung up the phone. I looked at the invitation again. $1,000 minimum gift. I smiled. I was going to give them a gift worth so much more than that. I was going to give them the truth, and it was going to cost them everything. I looked at the invitation sitting on my counter. It was not just a piece of plastic. It was a velvet rope. It was a barrier designed to keep the riffraff out. And in my family's eyes, I was the riffraff. I decided to give them one last chance, one final opportunity to prove that I was more to them than a credit score. I pulled out my phone. I typed the message slowly, making sure I sounded exactly like the desperate broke resident they thought I was. "Mom, I received the invitation. It is very fancy, but I saw the requirement for the gift. You know I am drowning in student loans right now. I barely made rent this month. I do not have $1,000 to spend on a gift. Does that mean I cannot come? I just want to be there for Chloe." I hit send. I stared at the screen. My heart was not pounding this time. It was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm. I knew what she was going to say, but I needed to see it. I needed to see it in writing. I needed the evidence of their conditional love. The response came 3 minutes later. It was a wall of text. "Zora, please do not be difficult. This is not a personal attack. It is a standard for the event. We are trying to elevate Chloe's standing with the Sterling family. They are accustomed to a certain level of elegance and wealth. We cannot have people showing up who look like they are looking for a handout. It ruins the aesthetic. If you cannot afford the buy-in, then perhaps it is best if you sit this one out. We do not want you feeling uncomfortable surrounded by successful people, and frankly, we do not want to be embarrassed. You know how you get when you feel out of place. You get sullen. You stand in the corner. It brings down the mood. Stay home. Pick up an extra shift. We will send you photos." I read the message. Then I read it again. "Stay home. Pick up an extra shift." She was telling a multimillionaire to go scrub floors because she did not fit the aesthetic. She was worried I would embarrass them. I laughed. It was a dark sound in the empty apartment. She had no idea. She was worried about me looking poor. She should have been worried about me looking powerful. She wanted me to stay away because I was a stain on their perfect picture. But stains do not just go away. Sometimes they spread. I typed back a single word. "Understood." I put the phone down. I walked over to the invitation and ran my finger over the gold lettering. They wanted wealth. They wanted elegance. They wanted a show. Fine. I would give them a show. But I was not going to sit in the audience. I was going to be the main event, and I was not going to wear my thrift store suit. I was going to wear war paint. I put the phone down on the counter. Understood. That was the last lie I would ever tell them. I understood perfectly. They did not want their poor daughter. They wanted a prop. But props do not fight back. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the apartment. I drove my rusted Honda to Phipps Plaza, the most exclusive shopping district in Atlanta. I parked between a Bentley and a Porsche. The valet looked at my car like it was a crime scene, but I tossed him a $20 bill and walked past him. I was on a mission. I walked into the Chanel boutique. The air inside was crisp and smelled of expensive leather and gardenias. I was wearing my worn-out scrubs and sneakers that had seen better days. The security guard tracked my movement with his eyes. A sales associate named Tiffany with a headset and a look of supreme boredom drifted toward me. "Can I help you find the exit?" she asked, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I ignored her. My eyes scanned the racks until they landed on it. The dress. It was a structural masterpiece in midnight blue silk, with hand-embroidered crystals that caught the light like captured stars. It was haute couture. It was the kind of dress Chloe would kill for but could never afford. "I want to try that on," I said, pointing to the mannequin. Tiffany laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Honey, that is the runway collection. It costs $50,000. The sale rack is at Macy's down the street. We do not do window shopping here. We have a client coming in 10 minutes who actually has an appointment." I looked at her. I looked at the dress. I did not want to try it on. I wanted to own it. I wanted to wear it like a weapon. I pulled out my wallet. It was a cheap Velcro thing I had used since med school. Tiffany sneered. Then I pulled out the card. It was not my debit card. It was the heavy black titanium card Harrison had overnighted to me, linked to the Phoenix Holdings account. The Centurion. The card that has no limit. The card that opens doors and shuts mouths. I held it up between two fingers. I am not window shopping. I am buying it. And I am buying the shoes. And the bag. Ring it up. Tiffany stared at the card. Her face went pale. The sneer vanished, replaced by a look of sheer terror. She knew what that card meant. She reached out with a trembling hand and took it. She ran it through the machine. Approved. The little beep was the best sound I had ever heard. I watched her demeanor shift from condescension to panic. She started packing the dress with reverence, wrapping it in layers of tissue paper, as if it were a religious artifact. I took the heavy bags. I looked at Tiffany, who was now bowing and scraping, trying to apologize. "Do not bother," I said, my voice cold. I walked out of the store. I had the armor. Now I needed the war paint. I walked into the salon, the one with the frosted glass doors and the waiting list that was usually 6 months long. It was the place where the real housewives of Atlanta got their blowouts, and where my sister dreamed of going, but settled for the mall kiosk instead. I did not have an appointment. I did not care. I walked up to the reception desk carrying my Chanel bags like they were shields. The receptionist, a woman with perfectly sculpted eyebrows and a headset, looked up. She scanned my scrubs, my messy bun, and the dark circles under my eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone implying that I was probably looking for the service entrance. "I need a transformation," I said, placing my black card on the counter. "I need cut, color, and styling. And I need it now. I have an event tonight and I intend to stop traffic." She looked at the card. She looked at me. She picked up the phone. "Andre," she said into the receiver, her eyes never leaving my face. "Clear your afternoon. We have a VIP." 3 hours later, I was sitting in a leather chair, staring at a stranger in the mirror. Andre was a magician. He had taken my dull, lifeless hair and turned it into a cascade of rich, dark silk that framed my face like a halo. He had cut it into sharp, modern layers that made my cheekbones look like they could cut glass. The color was a deep espresso with subtle mahogany lowlights that caught the light when I moved. It was expensive. It was sophisticated. It was power. Then came the makeup artist. She worked silently, her brushes moving over my face with precision. She contoured my jawline, highlighted my brow bone, and painted my lips a deep blood red. When she was done, I leaned forward. The tired, overworked resident was gone. The woman looking back at me was fierce. She was dangerous. She looked like someone who could buy and sell everyone in the room without breaking a sweat. I tipped them both $500 cash. Andre bowed. You look like a queen, darling, he whispered. Go slay them. I changed into the dress in the private dressing room. The silk slid over my skin like water. It fit perfectly, hugging every curve and flaring out at the bottom like a midnight sky. I stepped into the shoes, strappy stilettos that added 4 inches to my height. I picked up the clutch. I looked in the full-length mirror. I did not recognize myself. I looked like money. I looked like vengeance. I walked out of the salon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. People stopped and stared. A man in a suit actually walked into a lamppost because he was looking at me. I did not smile. I did not look down. I got into the back of the town car I had hired. To the Ritz-Carlton, I told the driver, and do not spare the horses. I was ready. The mouse was dead. The lion had arrived. I stood on the curb outside the salon with my Chanel bags at my feet, waiting for the town car I had ordered, but then I canceled it. A town car was safe. A town car was respectable. I did not want to be safe. I wanted to be nuclear. I walked 2 blocks to the exotic car rental agency that catered to the rappers and athletes of Atlanta. The manager looked up as I walked in. He saw the dress. He saw the hair. He saw the way I walked, like I owned the pavement beneath my feet. He did not ask for a credit check. He just asked which one I wanted. I walked past the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis. They were too common. I stopped in front of a McLaren 720S. It was black. Not a glossy, safe black, but a matte satin black that looked like a stealth bomber. It looked like something that flew under the radar right before it dropped the payload. That one, I said, pointing a manicured finger. The manager nodded, scrambling for the keys. I tossed my Centurion card on the desk. Keep it for the week, I said. I might need to make a quick getaway. Sliding into the driver's seat felt like putting on a second skin. The leather smelled rich and dangerous. I pushed the start button and the engine roared to life, a guttural growl that vibrated through my chest and settled in my bones. I pulled out into traffic, the low-slung beast parting the sea of sedans and SUVs like the Red Sea. I drove to a quiet overlook outside the city where I could see the skyline glittering in the twilight. I had one more piece of business to attend to before the party. I needed to prep the battlefield. I pulled out a burner phone I had bought at a convenience store earlier that day. I dialed Brad Sterling's number. I had memorized it from Chloe's emergency contact list years ago, back when I was the dutiful sister who handled all her paperwork. It rang twice. "Hello, Brad," answered his voice, professional, but weary. I could hear the background noise of the party prep, the clinking of glasses, and the murmur of early guests. "Mr. Sterling," I said, dropping my voice an octave, adopting the clipped, sterile tone of a hospital administrator. "I am calling from the Medical Credentialing Oversight Committee regarding Dr. Chloe Brooks." There was a pause. The background noise seemed to fade as he pressed the phone closer to his ear. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice sharpening. "I am afraid there are some significant discrepancies in her transcript files regarding her board certifications and clinical rotation grades," I lied smoothly. "We have flagged her file for immediate review due to irregularities consistent with academic dishonesty. We recommend you review her academic standing before proceeding with any joint professional or financial ventures. It is a matter of due diligence." "Who is this?" he demanded. "Who is calling?" I hung up. I tossed the burner phone out the window and watched it disappear into the bushes below. The seed was planted. Brad was smart. He was already suspicious after the dinner where I had humiliated Chloe with basic medical knowledge. Now he would be looking. He would be doubting. And when I put the evidence on the big screen, he would be ready to believe it. I put the car in gear. The engine growled, responding to my touch. It was showtime. The ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton was a spectacle of excess. My parents had spared no expense using the money they had stolen from my future to paint a portrait of generational wealth that did not exist. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a prism of light over the hundreds of guests who had paid the entry fee disguised as a gift. The floral arrangements were towering sculptures of white orchids and hydrangeas, imported from South America, costing more than my medical school tuition for a semester. In the center of it all stood my family, glowing with the sheen of unearned victory. My father David was holding a tumbler of scotch that was aged longer than I had been alive. He was cornering Mr. Sterling Brad's father near the ice sculpture. I heard his booming laugh echoing off the marble walls. We always knew Chloe was special. He bragged, his chest puffed out like a peacock. Intelligence skips a generation, they say, but in our family it just gets refined. She did not even have to study that hard, you know. It just comes to her. She has a photographic memory. It is a burden, really, being that gifted. Mr. Sterling nodded politely, swirling his drink, his eyes scanning the room. Perhaps wondering why a family with such supposed wealth needed a mortgage on a grandmother's house. My mother, Patricia, was working the other side of the room. She was clutching the arm of a hospital board member, her smile tight and predatory. "We are just so proud," she gushed. "We offered to pay for everything, of course. We did not want her to start her marriage with the burden of loans. It is a tradition in our family. We take care of our own. Zora. Well, Zora is different. She prefers to do things the hard way. She is very independent, almost to a fault. We tried to help her too, but she is just so proud." And then there was Chloe. She was wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously like a wedding gown cut low and tight. She was surrounded by her bridesmaids, her hand extended so the light would catch the diamond ring. "I worked so hard for this," she told a group of admiring cousins who were gazing at her with envy. Medical school was a grind, but I powered through. I guess I just have a knack for healing. It is a calling, not a job. And now to be debt-free, it is such a blessing. I really feel like I earned this moment. She looked radiant. She looked successful. She looked like a lie wrapped in silk. She raised her glass for a toast, her eyes scanning the room for adoration. She did not see the cracks in the foundation. She did not see the debt collectors looming in the shadows. She only saw the reflection of her own vanity. She thought she was the queen of the ball. She had no idea the executioner was already parking the car. The McLaren growled up the circular driveway of the Ritz-Carlton like a predator stalking prey. It was a low, rumbling sound that vibrated against the marble columns and made the polite conversation on the sidewalk stop dead. I saw the heads turn. I saw the valets straighten their ties. I saw the guests in their rented tuxedos crane their necks. They were expecting a Bentley or a Rolls-Royce, the standard-issue transport for the Atlanta elite. They were not expecting a war machine wrapped in matte black steel. I eased the car to a stop right in front of the red carpet. I did not rush. I let the engine idle for a moment, letting the anticipation build in the humid night air. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. The blood-red lips, the sharp predatory eyes, the hair that flowed like expensive silk. I wasn't Zora the doormat anymore. I wasn't Zora the sturdy sister. I was Zora the event. I pushed the button and the gull-wing door rose smoothly toward the sky. I swung my legs out. The strappy stilettos hit the pavement with a click that sounded like a trigger being pulled. I stood up, letting the midnight blue silk of the couture dress cascade down my body. It caught the lights from the hotel entrance shimmering like liquid sapphires against the dark night. The crystals embedded in the fabric sparked with every movement, turning me into a walking constellation. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of onlookers. I handed the key fob to the lead valet, who looked like he was afraid to touch it. His hands were shaking slightly as he accepted the weight of a $500,000 machine. "Keep it close," I said, my voice low and smooth. "I won't be staying long." He nodded, mute with awe, treating the key like a holy relic. The head of security, a massive man with an earpiece and a face carved from granite, stepped forward. He did not ask for my invitation. He did not ask for my ID. He did not ask if I had the required $1,000 gift. He unhooked the velvet rope before I even reached it, creating a wide path through the gawking guests. He leaned into his microphone, his hand shielding his mouth. "We have a VIP arrival," he murmured, his eyes scanning the perimeter, as if looking for my entourage or the paparazzi. Possible A-list talent. Clear the lane immediately. He thought I was a movie star. He thought I was royalty or a pop icon. He saw the car, the dress, and the attitude, and his brain filled in the blanks with fame. He had no idea I was the uninvited sister. He had no idea I was the poor relation who had been told to stay home because she would ruin the aesthetic. I walked onto the red carpet. The flash of a camera went off nearby, blinding white light against the dark. I didn't flinch. I walked with the rhythm of the $15 million sitting in my bank account. Every step was a mortgage payment. Every breath was a declaration of war. I looked up at the golden doors of the ballroom. Inside, my family was celebrating their lies. They were toasting to a future they couldn't afford. They thought they were safe behind their walls of delusion, but the wolf wasn't at the door. The wolf was walking through it wearing couture. I stepped through the gilded double doors of the ballroom and the atmosphere shifted instantly. The hum of polite conversation died down, replaced by the rustle of silk and the sharp intake of breath. I was not just walking, I was gliding. The midnight blue dress moved around me like liquid smoke, and the crystals caught the light from the chandeliers, turning me into a walking galaxy. I scanned the room looking for them. It did not take long. Near the champagne fountain holding court with a group of wealthy donors stood David and Patricia. My father was mid-laugh, his head thrown back, but the sound died in his throat when he saw me. He dropped his glass. It bounced on the thick carpet, splashing vintage Dom Perignon onto his tuxedo pants, but he did not even notice. He was staring at me as if he were seeing a ghost. A very expensive, terrifying ghost. My mother reacted faster. Her eyes widened, taking in the dress, the shoes, the hair, the sheer audacity of my presence. She did not see her daughter. She saw a threat. She saw a scandal waiting to happen. She practically sprinted across the room, her heels clicking frantically on the marble border. She reached me before I could take another step into the crowd. Her fingers, usually so careful not to wrinkle fabric, clamped onto my bicep with a bruising grip. She did not look at my face. She looked at the diamonds around my neck. She looked at the label quality stitching of the gown. And her eyes filled with a panic I had never seen before. "Come with me," she hissed, her voice a jagged whisper. "Now." She dragged me toward a heavy velvet curtain near the service entrance, away from the prying eyes of the Sterling family and the hospital board members. My father followed close behind, boxing me in his face, pale and sweaty. The smell of his fear was stronger than his cologne. They cornered me in the shadows, their bodies blocking my exit, their expressions twisted with accusation. "What have you done?" My mother spat, her voice trembling with rage and terror. "Have you lost your mind coming here like this? Who did you steal from Zora? Tell me right now before the police show up. Did you embezzle drugs from the hospital? Did you steal a prescription pad? Where did you get the money for this costume?" I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at the panic in her eyes. She could not conceive of a world where I earned this. In her mind, the only way I could look this good was through crime. "I did not steal anything," I said, my voice calm and icy. "Don't lie to me," she shrieked, keeping her voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. "I know what a resident's salary is. I know you are drowning in debt because we refused to help you. There is no way you paid for this legally. Did you rent it? Is that it? Did you max out another credit card just to come here and humiliate your sister by playing dress up? You look ridiculous. You look like a child trying to wear mommy's clothes." My father leaned in, his face inches from mine, his eyes searching mine for guilt. "Or is it worse?" he growled. "Did you get involved with something illegal? Are you selling yourself, Zora? Is that how you paid for this? God help us, if you brought dirty money into this room with the Sterlings here, I will destroy you myself. We are trying to build a legacy here, and you walk in looking like a high-priced escort trying to crash a gala. You are a disgrace. Get out." My mother ordered, her nails digging deeper into my skin, hoping to leave a mark. "Go back to the rental agency and return the dress before you rip it. Go back to your little apartment and stay there. You are not ruining Chloe's night with your criminal behavior. If you are not out of this building in 2 minutes, I will have security drag you out as a trespasser. Do you hear me? Go. Leave now before you embarrass us further. I looked down at her manicured fingers digging into the midnight blue silk of my sleeve. For 30 years, those hands had pushed me down, held me back, and slapped me into submission. But tonight, those hands looked old. They looked weak, and they looked cheap against the fabric of my reality. I did not just pull away. I jerked my arm back with a violence that made her stumble in her Jimmy Choos. She gasped, clutching her chest as if I had struck her, but I had only reclaimed my space. "Do not touch me," I said, my voice dropping to a register so cold it could freeze water. "And do not touch this dress. It cost $50,000. I paid for it in cash this morning. I do not want your desperation wrinkling the silk." My mother froze. Her eyes bulged. The number hung in the air between us like a guillotine blade. 50,000. It was a number she understood. It was a number she respected. It was more than the catering budget she had screamed at me about. It was more than the car she was forcing me to co-sign for. It was a year of her country club dues, and it was draped casually over the body of the daughter she had called a failure. "You are lying," she whispered, but the conviction was gone. Her eyes raked over the embroidery, the hand-stitched crystals, the perfect fit. She knew quality. She had spent her whole life worshipping it, and she knew that you could not rent this, you could not fake this. This was the real thing, and it terrified her. David stepped forward, his face a mask of confusion and anger. "Zora, stop this charade. We know you are broke. We know you are drowning in loans. Show me the receipt. Show me where you got the money, or I am calling the police right now and telling them you are soliciting in a family venue." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time, fueled by the absolute absurdity of their ignorance. I reached into my crystal-encrusted clutch. I did not pull out a receipt. I did not pull out a defense. I pulled out the heavy gold-embossed VVIP invitation card, the one Harrison had secured directly from the venue owners, the one that granted access to the owner's box and the private reserve wine list. "I am not crashing, Dad," I said, holding the card up so it caught the light. "I am a VVIP guest. I was invited by the people who own this building, the people who sign your checks. So unless you want to explain to the hotel management why you are harassing their most expensive guest, I suggest you step aside." He stared at the card. He recognized the seal. His bluster evaporated instantly, replaced by a small, pathetic fear. He looked at my mother, then back at me. He did not know who I was anymore. The daughter he could bully was gone. "Now, if you will excuse me," I said, stepping around them as if they were nothing more than furniture. "I have a party to attend. And Mom, check your lipstick. It is smudged. You look messy." I walked away, leaving them standing in the shadows of the service hallway. I did not look back. I could feel their eyes on me, burning with questions they were too afraid to ask. They were still trying to figure out how the scenery had changed. They did not realize the play was already over. I walked toward the light of the ballroom. The air tasted sweeter, the music sounded sharper. I was not just walking into a party, I was walking into my arena. I walked into the ballroom, and the world tilted. The hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft jazz from the live band, it all stopped. Or maybe it didn't stop, but it faded into the background like static on a radio. All I could feel was the weight of 100 eyes landing on me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to hide. I wanted to burn. The midnight blue silk moved with me like a second skin, the crystals catching the light from the chandeliers and scattering it across the room in 1,000 tiny prisms. I felt the gaze of the wealthy, the powerful, the beautiful, and I did not shrink. I met their stares. I saw the confusion first. Who is she? Is she famous? Is she new money or old? Then I saw the recognition dawn on the faces of those who knew me, my cousins, my aunts, the people who had pitied me for years. Their jaws dropped, their glasses froze halfway to their mouths. They were looking at Zora, the failure Zora, the spinster. Zora, the sturdy one, and they were seeing a goddess. I scanned the room for him. It didn't take long. Brad was standing near the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne, looking bored and handsome in his tuxedo. He was listening to some investment banker drone on about market volatility, his eyes glazing over. Then he looked up. He saw the path clearing in the crowd. He saw the woman walking down it. At first his expression was just appreciation, the instinctive male reaction to beauty. Then his brow furrowed. He tilted his head. He squinted as if trying to bring a blurry picture into focus. And then it clicked. The glass in his hand tilted dangerously close to spilling. His mouth opened slightly. He took a step forward, unconsciously drawn toward me like a moth to a flame. "Zora," he mouthed. He didn't say it loud enough to hear, but I read his lips. It wasn't a greeting. It was a question. It was a prayer. I smiled at him. It wasn't the polite, self-effacing smile I usually wore. It was a smile that said, "I know who I am. And now you do too." I walked past him close enough that my silk skirt brushed against his leg. I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge him beyond that smile. I let him smell the expensive perfume I had bought that morning. I let him see the confidence radiating off me in waves. I let him realize that the woman he had dismissed as the boring sister was the most interesting person in the room. He turned to follow me, his eyes locked on my back. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. He looked like he was waking up from a long sleep, and standing 10 feet away watching it all happen, watching her fiancé look at her sister with a hunger he had never shown her, was Chloe. I saw the exact moment Chloe snapped. It was not when I walked in. It was not when our parents failed to kick me out. It was when she saw Brad's eyes following me. That was the line. That was the boundary I was not allowed to cross. She handed her empty glass to a waiter and grabbed a full glass of heavy red wine from a passing tray. It was a tactical reload. She was not coming over to say hello. She was coming to destroy the dress. She was coming to mark her territory. She moved through the crowd with a singular, clumsy focus. Her eyes were locked on my chest, specifically on the hand-embroidered crystals that cost more than her car. She picked up speed. She was not even trying to make it look accidental this time. She wanted a collision. She wanted a scene where she could cry and say I bumped into her. She wanted to turn the diamond-clad goddess back into the clumsy big sister. "Zora," she shouted, her voice shrill and tight. "You have some nerve showing your face here." She lunged. It was a physical body check aimed right at my center of gravity. In the past, I would have frozen. I would have let her hit me, just to get it over with. But I had spent the last 5 years dodging bullets in the ER. I had reflexes honed by trauma surgery and survival. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I waited until the last possible second, until I could smell the cheap hairspray and desperation coming off her skin. And then I pivoted. I shifted my weight to my left foot and spun out of her path with the grace of a dancer. It was a movement so smooth it felt like water flowing around a rock. Chloe hit nothing but empty air. Her momentum betrayed her. She stumbled forward, her heels skidding on the polished marble floor. She flailed her arms, trying to find purchase, trying to grab onto me to save herself, but I was already out of reach. She pitched forward uncontrollably, directly into the path of the 6-foot-tall champagne tower. The sound was deafening. It started with a singular shatter as her body hit the table, and then cascaded into a symphony of destruction. Hundreds of crystal coupes crashed down around her. Gallons of expensive vintage champagne exploded outward, creating a tsunami of foam and glass. The table collapsed under her weight, sending the ice sculpture sliding onto the floor where it shattered into 1,000 wet diamonds. Chloe landed in the center of the wreckage. She was sprawled on her back, her white dress soaked through with sticky alcohol, her hair matted with glass shards. She looked like a drowned rat in a sea of broken dreams. The room went dead silent. The band stopped playing. The chatter ceased. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of champagne falling from the edge of the broken table onto the marble. I stood over her, not a drop of liquid on my silk gown. I looked down at my sister lying in the mess she had created. She looked up at me, her mascara running her eyes wide with shock and humiliation. For the first time in her life, she was the disaster, and I was the one standing spotless in the spotlight. I looked down at the wreckage. The white orchids were bruised and soaking in a pool of golden liquid. The ice sculpture was a jagged lump melting rapidly on the carpet. And in the middle of it all was Chloe gasping for breath, her chest heaving as the cold champagne soaked into her skin. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a car crash. The guests were frozen glasses halfway to their mouths, eyes wide with a mixture of horror and delight. This was the gossip that would fuel their luncheons for months. I did not walk away. I did not laugh. That would have been too easy. Instead, I crouched down. I moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator who has already caught its prey and is just playing with it. I made sure my midnight blue silk pulled carefully around me, avoiding the sticky mess. I extended a hand. It was steady. It was manicured. It was strong. "Here, let me help you," I said, my voice loud enough to carry to the first few rows of onlookers. It sounded concerned. It sounded like the dutiful big sister coming to the rescue. But when our eyes locked, Chloe saw the truth. She saw the cold, hard glint of satisfaction. She saw the end of her reign. She hesitated. She looked at my hand like it was a trap, but she had no choice. She was lying in broken glass in humiliation. She reached up, her fingers trembling and wet. I clamped my hand around her wrist. I did not pull gently. I yanked her up with a strength that surprised both of us. It was the strength of 5 years of carrying her dead weight. I hauled her to her feet, her heels skidding on the wet marble, until she was standing unsteady and dripping in front of me. I leaned in close. I brought my lips right to her ear, so that only she could hear the whisper that would haunt her nightmares. "Careful now, little sister." I murmured, my voice a low hum against her skin. "You do not want to fall apart yet. We haven't even gotten to the best part. Do not slip before the curtain goes up. The real show is just beginning." I felt her body seize. A shudder rippled through her frame, starting at her shoulders and running down to her soaked feet. She pulled back, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. For the first time, she realized that I wasn't just reacting to her. I was orchestrating this. She wasn't the protagonist of this tragedy. She was the prop. I stepped back, smoothing the front of my dress, which remained miraculously spotless. "Someone get a towel," I called out. My voice authoritative and calm, cutting through the shock of the room. "The bride has had a little accident." My parents rushed forward, then their faces pale with shock. My mother was making frantic motions at the waiters, screaming for help. My father was trying to block the view of the guests with his body, as if he could hide the disaster of his daughter with a tuxedo jacket. They swarmed her, patting at her dress, picking glass from her hair, whispering frantic reassurances. It was the floor, they said. It was the shoes. It was anything but her fault. I watched them. I watched them fuss and panic. I watched Brad standing a few feet away, looking at Chloe, not with concern, but with a dawning realization of just how messy his future was about to be. I smiled. I turned my back on the cleanup crew. I had a stage to find. The room eventually settled. The waitstaff had cleared the shattered glass with practiced efficiency, and Chloe had been whisked away to a private room for damage control. When she returned 10 minutes later, she had undergone a miraculous recovery. Her hair was slicked back into a severe bun to hide the champagne matting, and she had swapped the ruined white dress for a silver cocktail number that one of her bridesmaids had essentially been forced to surrender. She walked onto the stage, not with the shame of a woman who had just destroyed a $10,000 ice sculpture, but with the chin-up defiance of a martyr. She grabbed the microphone, her knuckles white. The spotlight hit her, and for a moment she looked almost convincing. She looked like a survivor. "Thank you, everyone," she said, her voice trembling with a carefully curated vulnerability. "Tonight has definitely had its ups and downs. But as I learned in medical school, it is not about how you fall. It is about how you get back up." A smattering of polite applause rippled through the room. My parents, standing near the front, looked relieved. They thought she was saving it. They thought the disaster was over. Chloe gained confidence, feeding off the attention like a vampire. I want to take a moment to thank the two people who made this night and my entire career possible. My parents, David and Patricia. She gestured to them, and they beamed, waving to the crowd like royalty. People ask me all the time how I managed to graduate medical school debt-free. They ask how a young doctor can afford a wedding like this, and the answer is hard work and sacrifice. I stood near the sound booth, my arms crossed, listening to the bile rise in my throat. Hard work, sacrifice. My parents sacrificed everything for me. She continued, wiping a tear that I was 90% sure was fake. But I also want to take a moment to be proud of myself. I worked 3 jobs in undergrad. I studied until my eyes burned to earn the academic merit scholarship that paid for my tuition. I did not take handouts. I earned every single dollar that went into my education. And standing here tonight, debt-free, ready to start my life with Brad, I know that I did it the right way. I did it with integrity. The room erupted in applause. Brad looked at her with renewed admiration, his doubts seemingly washed away by her performance. My mother was sobbing openly now, clutching my father's arm. They were buying it. Everyone was buying it. She was rewriting history in real time, erasing my labor, erasing the theft, erasing the fraud. She was claiming my late nights, my tutoring sessions, and my stolen credit rating as her own personal triumph. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me, standing in the shadows. She smiled. It was a small, triumphant smirk that said, "I won." She thought she had spun the narrative. She thought she was untouchable. She raised her glass. "To integrity," she said. I looked at her. "To integrity," I whispered. I turned to the sound technician who was watching the stage with bored indifference. It was time to correct the record. I turned away from the stage where my sister was currently receiving a standing ovation for a life she had stolen. The applause washed over me like static. I walked toward the back of the room where the audio-visual booth was set up behind a black curtain. It was a small fortress of monitors, soundboards, and tangled cables manned by a guy who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. He was wearing a black hoodie and headphones, scrolling through his phone, completely checked out from the high society drama unfolding 20 feet away. I stepped into the booth. The air was cooler here, smelling of ozone and electronics. The technician looked up, startled. He pulled his headphones down around his neck. "Hey, you can't be back here. This is for staff only." I didn't apologize. I didn't leave. I reached into my clutch. I pulled out a sleek silver USB drive. It felt heavy in my hand, not because of its weight, but because of what it carried. It carried 5 years of receipts. It carried the medical records. It carried the truth. I placed it gently on the mixing board right next to his hand. Then I reached into my clutch again. I pulled out a stack of $100 bills. It was $5,000 bound in a thick rubber band. I had withdrawn it earlier that day specifically for this moment. I placed the brick of cash directly on top of the USB drive. The technician stared at it. His eyes went wide. He looked at the money, then at me, then back at the money. He swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. I leaned in close, the smell of expensive perfume mixing with the scent of burning circuits. "There is a presentation on that drive," I said, my voice low and smooth. "It is labeled The Truth. When I walk up to that stage and take the microphone, I want you to cut the feed from the current laptop and switch to mine. I want it on the main screen, and I want the volume up. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the cash. I could get fired, lady. The wedding planner gave me a specific run of show. I pushed the stack closer to him. That is $5,000, I said. That is more than you will make in 2 months working this gig. And if you get fired, I will hire you tomorrow at triple your rate. I just need 5 minutes. Do we have a deal? He looked at the stage where Chloe was now hugging our parents, posing for photos. He looked at the bored expression on his own face reflected in the monitor. He picked up the cash and shoved it into his hoodie pocket. He plugged the USB drive into the main terminal. Give me the signal, he said. I smiled. It was the last smile I would ever give in secret. I turned and looked out at the ballroom. My family was celebrating. They were laughing. They were drinking champagne paid for with fraud. They thought the night was peaking. They thought the danger had passed. I smoothed the silk of my $50,000 dress. Saike. I took a deep breath. I walked out of the booth and into the light. I wasn't just walking to the stage. I was walking to the funeral of their reputation. And I was the one delivering the eulogy. The applause for my sister was just beginning to fade when I emerged from the shadows of the sound booth. The room was warm and smelled of expensive perfume and hydrangeas, but all I could feel was the cold steel of the microphone I was about to hold. I walked down the center aisle, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet. The crowd parted for me, not out of politeness, but out of confusion. They saw the dress first, the $50,000 masterpiece that shimmered like a night sky. Then they saw my face. I ascended the stairs to the stage. The click of my stilettos on the wooden steps echoed in the sudden silence. Chloe saw me. Her smile did not just drop, it evaporated. Her eyes darted to our parents who were standing in the front row, their hands frozen mid-clap. She looked like she was seeing a ghost wearing couture and carrying a grudge. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her voice barely audible over the hum of the sound system. "Get down! You are ruining everything!" I did not answer her. I did not even look at her. I looked at the microphone in her hand. It was the scepter she had used to rule this kingdom of lies for the last hour. I reached out. She tried to pull it back. Her knuckles white, but I was faster. I was stronger. I snatched the microphone from her grip with a sharp movement that made the feedback squeal through the speakers. The noise made the guests wince, covering their ears. It was a violent, ugly sound that shattered the polite atmosphere of the gala. I waited for the ringing to stop. I waited until every single pair of eyes in the room was locked on me. I saw Brad staring up at me, his mouth slightly open. I saw my mother clutching her pearls, her face a mask of terrified anticipation. I saw my father taking a step forward, his hand raised as if to stop me, but he was too late. He was always too late. I brought the microphone to my lips. My voice did not shake. It boomed through the ballroom, magnified and distorted by the expensive sound system filling every corner of the room with my reality. "I am so sorry to interrupt the festivities," I said, my tone smooth and dangerous like velvet wrapped around a knife. It was such a moving speech, Chloe. Truly, the part about hard work and sacrifice was particularly touching. But as your big sister and as someone who values accuracy above all else, I feel compelled to make a few small corrections to the record. Chloe grabbed my arm. "Zora, stop," she begged, her voice rising in panic. "Do not do this, please." I shook her off effortlessly. I turned to face the crowd. "You see, we are all here to celebrate a debt-free future. We are here to celebrate integrity. But you cannot have a debt-free future when your foundation is built on stolen money. And you cannot celebrate integrity when you have spent your entire life being a fraud." The room was deadly silent. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. "So before we cut the cake," I continued, "I think it is only fair that everyone knows exactly who paid for this party, and exactly what it cost. Because the bill has finally come due. And tonight, everyone pays." I looked up at the technician in the booth. He was watching me, his hand hovering over the console. I gave him a single sharp nod. It was the signal. The lights dimmed, and the nightmare began. The ballroom lights dimmed, plunging the room into a dramatic twilight. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, confusion mixing with anticipation. Behind me, the massive projection screen that had been displaying a slideshow of Chloe and Brad's engagement photos flickered and went black. Then, with a digital hum that sounded like a judgment, it lit up again. The image was crisp, high definition, and devastating. It was a side-by-side comparison chart. On the left, under the heading, Dr. Chloe Brooks was a transcript. It was a C of mediocrity. C- in anatomy. D+ in pharmacology. C in pathology. The GPA at the bottom read a struggling 2.4. It was the transcript of someone who should not be allowed to put a Band-Aid on a cut, let alone practice medicine. On the right, under the heading, Dr. Zora Brooks, was a different story. Straight A's. Honors in every rotation. A perfect 4.0. The contrast was stark, undeniable, and humiliating. It was visual proof that the golden child was actually made of lead. But the slide did not stop there. Below the transcripts were screenshots of emails. I pointed to the screen, my hand steady. "You all heard Chloe talk about hard work," I said, my voice ringing out over the sound system. "She told you she studied until her eyes burned. Let us see what that studying actually looked like." The emails were magnified, so even the people in the back row could read them. From Chloe to Zora. Subject: help me. Zora: I am going to fail the renal module. You have to take the online exam for me. I will pay you. Mom said you would do it. Please, I have a date with Brad and I have not opened the book. From Chloe to Zora. Subject boards: if I do not pass step 1, Dad is going to kill me. You need to make me a study guide. Actually, just write the practice essays for me. I can memorize them. You're the smart one, just handle it. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It started in the front row and rolled back like a wave. The wealthy donors, the hospital board members, the Sterling family, they were all staring at the screen with their mouths open. The illusion of the brilliant, dedicated Dr. Chloe Brooks shattered in an instant. "That is a lie," Chloe shrieked, lunging for me. Jing. But she was too slow. She was weighed down by her shame. "Those are fake. She photoshopped them." "They are not fake, Chloe," I said, stepping out of her reach. "They are dated. They are time-stamped, and they are backed up on the university server. You did not study. You outsourced your education to me. I took your tests. I wrote your papers. I dragged you through medical school while you were busy planning outfits. You are not a doctor because of your brain. You are a doctor because of mine." I looked at Brad. He was staring at the screen, his face pale. He looked from the D+ in pharmacology to his fiancée. He looked like a man who had just realized he bought a counterfeit painting for millions of dollars. The disgust on his face was the first real thing I had seen all night. "But wait," I said, cutting through the rising murmur of the crowd. "Academic fraud is bad, but it is not the worst thing you did. Being stupid is not a crime. But stealing, that is a different story." I clicked the remote in my hand. The humiliating transcript vanished from the massive screen behind me. The room was buzzing with the energy of a scandal breaking in real time, but I was not done. "You called me a failure, Mom. You told everyone here that I was drowning in debt. You told me I was not welcome tonight because I could not afford the entry fee. You were worried I would embarrass you with my poverty." The screen flickered and a new document appeared. It was not a grade sheet. It was a contract. The header read, "MedTech Innovations Acquisition Agreement." The text was dense legal jargon, but I had instructed the technician to highlight one specific paragraph in neon yellow. The purchase price: $15 million. The number was projected 10 feet high. 15 followed by 6 zeros. The collective gasp that went through the room sucked the oxygen right out of the air. It was a physical sound, a sudden intake of breath from 300 people at once. My father David was standing near the front row, holding a glass of aged scotch that probably cost $50 a pour. His hand went slack. The heavy crystal tumbler slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor with a wet shatter, splashing amber liquid over his tuxedo shoes, but he did not flinch. He did not look down. His eyes were bulging out of his head, fixed on the screen. His mouth hung open, a perfect circle of shock. $15 million, I said, my voice calm and deadly. That is what I sold my patent for last week. While Chloe was busy almost killing patients, I was inventing a microsurgical suturing device that is going to revolutionize neurosurgery. While you were forging my signature to buy her a car, I was negotiating with the biggest medical technology firm in the country. My mother, Patricia, looked like she was having a stroke. Her face went from pale to a mottled red. She clutched her chest, her eyes darting from the screen to me and back again. She started doing the math in her head. I could see the gears turning. I could see the greed replacing the shock. She took a step toward the stage, her hands reaching out instinctively. Zora, she gasped, her voice shrill in the silent room. Zora, baby. Why did you not tell us? That is family money. We can do so much with that. I laughed. It was a sharp, cold sound. Family money. No, mother. That is Zora money. That is the sturdy sister's money. That is the money of the daughter you slapped in a hospital hallway. You wanted $1,000 gift to prove I was worthy of entering this room. Well, here is the receipt. I could buy this hotel. I could buy your country club. I could buy every single thing you own and burn it just for the heat. Chloe stood frozen near the edge of the stage. She looked at the number on the screen and then down at her 3-carat engagement ring. Suddenly her diamond looked very small. She looked at me with a mixture of hatred and terror. She realized in that moment that the hierarchy had flipped. She was not the princess anymore. She was the pauper, and the sister she had tormented for decades was the queen. But wait, I said, cutting through the murmurs of the stunned crowd. Money is great, success is great. But you know what is better than having $15 million? It is knowing exactly where your parents got the money to pay for this party. You see, folks, being rich does not make you a criminal, but stealing, that definitely does. I signaled the booth again. The $15 million faded away, and the final nail in the coffin appeared. I watched the realization spread across my father's face like a slow-acting poison. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the screen where the final document was now displayed. It was a digital scan of a mortgage assignment. But it wasn't just any mortgage. It was the lien on 422 Oak Street. The house my grandmother had left to all of us. The house they had secretly leveraged. The text was blown up so even the nearsighted donors in the back could read it. Assignment of deed of trust. Borrower: David and Patricia Brooks. But it was the next line that mattered. It was the line that had the loan officer from Peachtree Regional Bank stamp on it. Transferred to Phoenix Holdings, LLC. I pointed at the screen. My hand didn't shake. You told me you needed to sell Big Mama's house to pay for the wedding. You told me you were cash poor. But that wasn't true, was it, Dad? You had already cashed out. You took out a second mortgage on a paid-off house 2 years ago, $100,000. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the projector. But here is the problem. I continued, my voice calm and deadly. The house was in my name too. Big Mama left it to all of us. You needed my signature to get that loan, and I never signed anything. So how did you get the money? I clicked the remote. The image changed. It zoomed in on the signature page of the loan application. There was my name, Zora Brooks, scrawled in black ink. Next to it was a forensic handwriting analysis report. The words, "Forgery high probability," were highlighted in red. You forged my signature. You committed bank fraud. You stole my identity to pay off Chloe's credit card debt. And then you stopped paying the mortgage. You let the loan go into default while you were planning this party. You were going to let the bank foreclose on Big Mama's house, and you were hoping you could sell it to a developer before they noticed. My mother let out a strangled cry. She looked at the screen, then at the crowd. Her face was a mask of pure terror. She knew what this meant. This wasn't just a family dispute, this was prison. But you made a mistake, I said, stepping closer to the edge of the stage. You underestimated me. You thought I was broke. You thought I was stupid. But while you were busy planning flower arrangements, I was busy buying debt. I clicked the remote one last time. The final document appeared. It was a foreclosure notice. But the letterhead didn't say Peachtree Regional Bank. It said Phoenix Holdings, LLC. You see, I bought the note. I bought your bad debt from the bank. I own the mortgage now. And since you haven't made a payment in 90 days, I exercise my right as the creditor. The words Phoenix Holdings faded and were replaced by a new line of text. Property 422 Oak Street. Status foreclosed. New owner Zora Brooks. I looked at my parents. I looked at their horrified faces. I own the house, Dad. I own the roof over your head. I own the bed you sleep in. And as of this morning, you are trespassing. The glass in my father's hand shattered. He didn't drop it this time. He crushed it. Blood welled up in his palm, dripping onto the expensive carpet. He looked at me with eyes that were black with hate. But it didn't matter. He had no power. He had no leverage. He was a tenant in a house he had stolen, and the landlord had just arrived with an eviction notice. I gripped the microphone one last time. The silence in the ballroom wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. My mother had collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. My father was staring at his bleeding hand as if he did not recognize it. Chloe was shaking her head back and forth, a silent denial of the reality crashing down on her. So let us recap, I said, my voice booming through the speakers. We are here to celebrate Chloe's fresh start. We are here because my parents wanted to show the world that they take care of their own. And they did. They took care of Chloe. They paid off her loans. They bought her a car. They threw her a wedding that cost $250,000. I walked to the edge of the stage looking down at them, but they did not pay for it with their hard work. They paid for it with my heritage. They stole the equity from the house my grandmother built brick by brick. They stole my name. They stole my credit. And they thought they could get away with it because they thought I was weak. I turned to Chloe. She looked small now. The silver dress looked like a costume. The diamond ring looked like glass. Congratulations, little sister, I said, my voice dripping with ice. You are officially debt-free. You have 0 student loans. You have a clean slate. You got exactly what you wanted. I paused, letting the words sink in. But Mom and Dad? I continued, turning my gaze to my parents. They are not quite so lucky. Because while they were busy paying for your champagne, they forgot to pay the mortgage. And now the bank has called the note. I pointed at the foreclosure notice still glowing on the screen behind me. That house does not belong to David and Patricia Brooks anymore. It belongs to me. And I am not a charitable landlord. I do not tolerate tenants who destroy the property and steal from the owner. My mother looked up, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. Zora, please, she wailed, her voice thin and pathetic. Where will we go? That is our home. It was your home, I corrected. Now it is my asset. And I have already filed the eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Whatever is left inside after 30 days goes to the curb. A gasp went through the room. The wealthy guests, the people my parents had tried so hard to impress, were recoiling. They were not looking at my parents with sympathy. They were looking at them with the kind of social horror reserved for people who had been exposed as frauds. So enjoy the party, I said. Drink the champagne. Eat the cake. Because when you wake up tomorrow, you are not going back to your mansion. You are going to be looking for an apartment. And judging by your credit score, you might want to start looking in the bad part of town. I let the microphone drop. It hit the floor with a thud that signaled the end of their lives as they knew them. The feed cut out. The screen went black. And for the first time in 30 years, I was the one looking down, and they were the ones looking up. The silence that followed my declaration was shattered by the sound of a chair scraping violently against the floor. It was Brad. He stood up slowly, his movements stiff and mechanical, as if he were trying to hold himself together by sheer force of will. His face was no longer pale. It was flushed with a deep, angry red that started at his collar and rose to his hairline. He looked at the screen where the foreclosure notice still burned bright and accusing. Then he looked at my parents who were cowering in their seats. Finally, he turned his gaze to Chloe. She reached for him, her hands trembling. "Brad, baby, please," she whimpered. "Let me explain. It is not what it looks like. Zora is lying. She manipulated the files. You know how jealous she is. Do not touch me," he roared. The sound of his voice made her flinch back as if he had struck her. He looked at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated loathing. "It was the look you give to something you scrape off your shoe. I defended you," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "When that woman called me about your credentials, I defended you. I thought it was a prank. I thought it was a mistake. But it was true, wasn't it? All of it." Chloe sobbed, shaking her head frantically. "No, Brad, I love you. That is all that matters." "Love," he scoffed. "You do not know what love is. You love my money, you love my last name, you love the idea of being a Sterling. But you are nothing." He took a step closer to her, towering over her in her silver dress. "I could handle you not being brilliant, Chloe. I could handle you being average. I could even handle you needing help. But this is not just incompetence. You are a fraud. You have lied to me every single day since we met. You lied about your grades, you lied about your research, you lied about your finances." He gestured to the screen behind me. "And you did not just lie. You stole. You let your parents steal from your own sister to buy you a car, to buy you this dress, to buy you me." He turned to look at my parents, who were staring at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. "And you two. I thought you were eccentric. I thought you were just proud parents. But you are monsters. You stole your daughter's identity. You committed felonies to fund a lifestyle you cannot afford. That is not a family. That is a criminal enterprise. And I will not let my name be dragged into the mud with you." "Brad," she wailed, reaching for his hand again. "Please, we can fix this. My dad will fix it." "Fix it?" He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Your dad is homeless, Chloe. Zora just evicted him. There is nothing to fix. It is over." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He did not open it. He did not offer it. He threw it. It hit Chloe in the chest and fell to the floor, rolling away under a table. "I was going to give you this tonight," he said, his voice cold and final. "A wedding gift. But you do not deserve diamonds. You deserve a lawyer." He turned his back on her. He looked at me standing on the stage. He nodded once, a short, sharp gesture of respect and apology. Then he walked away, leaving Chloe standing alone in the wreckage of her life, sobbing for a man who finally saw her for exactly what she was. The silence in the ballroom was shattered again, but this time it was not by a microphone or a glass breaking. It was the sound of Mrs. Sterling's heels clicking across the marble floor. She moved with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. She walked past her sobbing, almost daughter-in-law, without even a glance. Her target was my mother. Patricia was still slumped in her chair, trying to make herself invisible, but there was no hiding from a woman like Eleanor Sterling. Mrs. Sterling stopped 2 feet in front of my mother. She did not raise her voice. She did not scream. She spoke with the quiet, terrifying authority of a woman whose family name was on the library downtown. "This is a circus," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a razor blade. "And we are leaving." Patricia scrambled to her feet, her hands shaking as she reached out. "Eleanor, please, let us explain. Zora is just upset. She is twisting things. We can fix this." Mrs. Sterling recoiled as if she had been touched by something contagious. "Do not touch me," she hissed. Do not say my name. You are liars. You are grifters. You brought us here under false pretenses. You paraded that girl around my home. You let her sit at my table. You let her lie to my son. And you knew. You knew she was a fraud. You knew you were criminals. Mr. Sterling stepped up beside his wife. He looked at my father David, who was clutching his bleeding hand. David looked up, his eyes pleading for mercy from a man he had spent years trying to impress. Arthur, please. We are friends. We are not friends, Mr. Sterling said, his voice cold and hard. Friends do not let their children marry into a felony. Friends do not try to defraud their future in laws. I am pulling my accounts from your firm first thing Monday morning, and I will be advising the board to do the same. The color drained from my father's face. That would destroy him. That would be the final nail in his professional coffin. Arthur, you cannot do that. That is my livelihood. You should have thought about that before you stole your daughter's identity, Mr. Sterling replied. He turned to Brad, who was still standing over Chloe, looking like a man who had just woken up from a coma. Bradley, let us go. Now. Brad looked at Chloe one last time. She was on the floor amidst the ruin of her dress and her dignity reaching for him. Brad, wait, she sobbed. He stepped back. Goodbye, Chloe. Mrs. Sterling grabbed Brad's arm. She steered him away from the wreckage of the Brooks family. As she turned to leave, she paused. She looked at my parents one last time. Her gaze swept over them from head to toe, stripping away every ounce of their pretension. It was a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. It was the look you give to something rotting on the sidewalk. You are pathetic, she said. She turned and marched toward the exit, her husband and son in tow. The crowd parted for them instantly. No one wanted to be in their way. No one wanted to be associated with the family they were leaving behind. I watched them go. I watched the golden ticket my parents had pinned all their hopes on walk out the door. They had sacrificed my future to buy entry into that family. And now they were watching their investment walk away, leaving them with nothing but debt and shame. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind the Sterlings, sealing the tomb of Chloe's social aspirations. For a heartbeat, the ballroom was suspended in a vacuum of shock. Then the scream tore through the air. It was a primal sound, a mixture of grief and rage, that sounded like an animal caught in a trap. Chloe scrambled to her feet, her silver dress torn at the hem, her hair wild. She did not look at the guests. She did not look at her parents. She looked at me. You ruined everything, she shrieked, her face contorted into a mask of pure hate. You jealous, bitter witch! You took him from me! She lunged. It was not the clumsy stumble from earlier. This was a full assault. She cleared the space between the table and the stage in seconds, her hands clawed into talons, reaching for my face, reaching for the dress, reaching for anything she could destroy. But she never made it. Two massive security guards materialized from the shadows. They intercepted her at the base of the stairs. One grabbed her waist, the other secured her arm. She thrashed against them, kicking and spitting, completely unhinged. Let me go, she screamed. I am going to kill her. She ruined my life. I stood on the edge of the stage looking down at her. I did not step back. I did not flinch. I just watched. It was pathetic. It was the temper tantrum of a toddler who had been told no for the first time in her life. Get her out of here, I said to the guards, my voice calm over the speakers. Chloe stopped fighting. She sagged in the guard's grip, panting. Then she turned her head. Her eyes locked onto David and Patricia, who were still sitting in their chairs, frozen in horror. The target shifted. The rage found a new home. This is your fault, she screamed, her voice cracking. You said you handled it. You said the loan was secret. You said Zora would never find out. My mother flinched as if she had been slapped. Chloe, baby, please. We tried. You tried, she mocked, her voice dripping with venom. You are incompetent. You are stupid, useless old fools. You told me you had the money. You told me I could have the car and the house and the husband. You promised me. And you blew it. You let her win. She pointed a shaking finger at them. You owe me, she shrieked. You owe me a husband. You owe me a future. You lost Brad for me because you could not even commit a simple fraud correctly. Why are you so useless?" My father looked at her, his face gray. "Chloe, we did everything for you. We risked prison for you. And look where it got me," she spat. "I am single. I am humiliated. And I am broke. I hate you. I hate both of you. You are not my parents. You are liabilities." The guards began to drag her backward toward the exit. She dug her heels into the carpet, leaving long streaks in the plush wool. "Fix this!" she screamed at them, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Fix it now, or I swear to God I will testify against you myself. I will tell the police everything. I will send you to jail just to watch you rot." Her threats faded as the guards hauled her through the double doors. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. I looked at my parents. They were staring at the empty doorway where their golden child had just promised to destroy them. The monster they had created had finally turned around and bitten the hand that fed it. And the bite mark was deep. The heavy doors swung shut, cutting off the echo of Chloe's screams. The silence rushed back into the ballroom heavier than before, suffocating the remaining guests. My parents sat there isolated in a sea of empty chairs where their wealthy friends used to be. They looked small. They looked like what they were, criminals who had just been caught. Then my father made a sound. It was a wet, gurgling noise deep in his throat. He clutched his chest, his fingers digging into his tuxedo shirt. His face, already gray from shock, turned a waxen shade of white. He slumped sideways, sliding out of his chair and hitting the floor with a heavy thud. It was not a graceful fall. It was the collapse of a man whose entire world had just been vaporized. My mother screamed, "David! Oh my God, David!" She fell to her knees beside him, loosening his tie with shaking hands. "Help him! Someone help him! Please!" A few doctors in the crowd moved forward instinctively, their oaths kicking in despite their disgust. They checked his pulse. They checked his breathing. One of them looked up. "He is having an angina attack. It is stress-induced. He needs oxygen, but he is stable." He was not dying. He was just realizing the bill had come due. Patricia looked up from her husband's heaving chest. Her eyes found mine standing on the stage above them. She did not look angry anymore. She looked desperate. She scrambled to her feet and ran toward me. She did not care about her dress or her dignity. She reached the edge of the stage and gripped the hem of my $50,000 gown, her knuckles white. "Zora, please," she wailed, the tears finally real. "Look at your father. You are killing him. Is this what you wanted? Do you want to see him die right here on the floor? We are your family, Zora. We are your flesh and blood." I looked down at her. This was the woman who had slapped me. This was the woman who had called me sturdy. This was the woman who had stolen my identity. And now she was begging for my mercy, using the very bond she had severed 1,000 times. "Stop it, Zora," she begged. "Undo this. Tell them it was a mistake. Give us the house back. We can fix this. We can be a family again. I did it for you too, Zora. I did it for all of us. I just wanted us to be successful. I wanted us to be happy. Mothers make hard choices. You have to understand. Please, baby. Just help us. We love you." I stared at her grasping hands. She was not sorry for what she did. She was sorry she lost. She was using my father's health as a shield and her mother's love as a weapon. It was the ultimate manipulation, the last card in her deck. She was trying to gaslight me one final time, trying to make me feel guilty for her crimes. But she forgot one thing. I wasn't playing anymore. I stepped back, pulling my dress out of her grip. Her hands grasped at empty air. I looked at the doctors tending to my father. I looked at the crowd watching the final act of this tragedy. And then I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and realized I felt absolutely nothing. The cord was cut. The debt was paid. And her tears were just water. I looked down at my mother, who was still clutching the air where my dress had been. Her tears were cutting tracks through her foundation, revealing the terrified aging woman underneath. She kept repeating the word family like a mantra, as if saying it enough times would magically erase the felonies she had committed. Family, I repeated, testing the word on my tongue. It tasted like ash. You keep saying that word, Mom. But I do not think you know what it means. Family does not steal your identity. Family does not leave you to drown in debt while they throw parties. Family does not slap you in a hospital hallway because you refuse to be exploited. I gestured to the empty ballroom, the scattered chairs, the ruined cake. This was never about family. This was about your ego. You wanted to play the part of the wealthy matriarch. You wanted to show off your perfect daughter to the Sterlings. And you were willing to cannibalize your other daughter to do it. You did not care if I lost my medical license. You did not care if my credit was ruined. You only cared about how you looked in the photos. My father groaned from the floor, his face still pale, but the color returning as the angina subsided. He looked up at me with a mixture of fear and resentment. We raised you, Zora. We put a roof over your head. And then you stole the equity out of it, I countered. You cashed in your parental rights a long time ago, Dad. You defaulted on the mortgage of fatherhood. I straightened my spine, looking at them with a clarity that was absolute. I am done listening to your excuses. I am done being your victim. And I am certainly done being your family. Here is the reality. You have 30 days. That is the legal minimum for an eviction notice. Use that time wisely. Pack your boxes. Find a storage unit. Find a rental that accepts tenants with a foreclosure on their record. Because on the morning of day 31, the locks will be changed, and anything you leave behind will be donated. My mother sobbed quietly, her spirit finally breaking. What will you do with the house, Zora? You cannot live there alone. It is too big. It has too many memories. I am not going to live there, I said, my voice cold. I would never live in a house stained by your greed. I am gutting it. I am renovating it. And then I am donating it. Donating it, she whispered, horrified. Yes. I am turning Big Mama's house into a transitional housing center for medical students from low-income backgrounds. Students who are working 2 jobs to survive. Students who actually study instead of cheating. It is going to be a sanctuary for people who know the value of hard work. People like the daughter you should have appreciated. I looked at the doctors who were helping my father sit up. Take him to the ER, I said. Make sure he is stable, and then send the bill to his address. I am not paying for it. I turned my back on them. I walked down the stairs of the stage. The sound of my heels on the marble was the only sound in the room. I did not look back. I did not feel guilty. I felt lighter than I had in 30 years. The house was gone. The family was gone. And I was finally free. 30 days later, the moving truck idled in front of the Sunset Arms apartment complex. It was a generous name for a square brick building sitting next to a pawn shop and a liquor store on the edge of the city. My parents stood on the cracked sidewalk staring at their new kingdom. It was a 2-bedroom unit on the ground floor with bars on the windows and a persistent smell of damp carpet in the hallway. My mother, Patricia, clutched a box of her porcelain figurines, looking at the peeling paint on the door like it was contagious. She was not wearing Chanel today. She was wearing sweatpants. My father, David, dragged a mattress up the steps, his back bent under the weight of his failure. There were no movers. There was no staff. Just the 2 of them and the heavy reality of their consequences. Chloe was not helping them move. She was across town wearing a polyester uniform that smelled like fryer grease and despair. The hospital had not waited for a hearing. The moment the evidence of her academic fraud and the patient safety violation hit the review board, she was terminated immediately. Her residency was over. Her medical license was flagged pending a full investigation she would never pass. She was unhireable in the medical field. Now she was working the lunch shift at a 24-hour diner, trying to make enough tips to pay her share of the rent on the apartment she now shared with our parents. A customer waved her over. He was a truck driver with grease under his fingernails, snapping his fingers at her like she was a dog. Hey, honey, where is my refill? I have been waiting 10 minutes. Chloe froze. A month ago, she was Dr. Brooks. A month ago, she was a bride to be with a multi-millionaire fiancé. Now she was Honey. She picked up the coffee pot, her hand shaking with a mixture of rage and exhaustion. She walked over to the table. She poured the coffee, but her eyes were blurry with tears, and she missed the cup spilling hot brown liquid onto the Formica table. The man groaned, throwing his napkin down. Watch it. Are you stupid or something? God, it is hard to find good help these days. Chloe looked at him. She wanted to scream that she was a doctor. She wanted to scream that she was special. But she wasn't. She was a fraud. She was a girl with a mountain of debt and no way to pay it. She grabbed a rag and started wiping the table, keeping her head down. "I am sorry, sir," she whispered. "It will not happen again." Back at the apartment, the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing about money. My mother sat on a box in the middle of the cramped living room and wept. "This cannot be our life, David," she sobbed. "We are respectable people. We belong in the country club." My father did not answer. He just looked at the stack of bills on the counter. The legal fees from the fraud investigation were eating the last of his pension. They were trapped. Trapped in a small box with the daughter they had ruined and the debt they had created. They had traded their mansion for a prison of their own making. And the worst part was, they knew exactly who had put them there. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window of my new office, the city of Atlanta, spread out below me like a glittering map. The plaque on my door still smelled of fresh brass polish, chief of neurosurgery. At 30 years old, I was the youngest person to ever hold the title. It was not given to me. I had earned it with every suture, every sleepless night, and every diagnostic save that no one else could make. My desk was clean. No clutter, no unpaid bills. Just a sleek laptop, a framed photo of Big Mama's house, which was currently being renovated by a team of the best contractors in the state, and a Crystal Award from MedTech Innovations for Breakthrough of the Year. My phone buzzed on the mahogany surface. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number, but the area code was familiar. It was the same area code as the Sterling estate. I hesitated, then picked it up. "Hello? This is Dr. Brooks." "Zora." It was Brad. His voice sounded different, less polished, less sure of himself. "It has been a while. I just wanted to call and say congratulations. I saw the announcement about your promotion in the medical journal. It is impressive." "Thank you, Brad," I said, my voice cool and professional. "Was there something specific you needed?" He cleared his throat. "Actually, yes. I was wondering if maybe we could get dinner sometime. I know things ended badly with your family, but I always thought you were the most interesting person at that table. I was just too blind to see it then. My mother talks about you all the time. She says you have a formidable mind. I would love to pick your brain about that biotech investment strategy we discussed, or just get to know you better, without the drama." I looked out at the skyline. I thought about the night at his parents' house. I thought about how he had looked at me when I talked about tumor microenvironments. He was handsome. He was wealthy. He was offering me a connection to a world of power and influence. A year ago, I might have been flattered. A year ago, I might have thought this was my happy ending. The validation that I was finally good enough. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't looking for validation. I had $15 million in the bank and a hospital wing with my name on it. I had saved my own life. I did not need a savior. "That is a kind offer, Brad," I said, my voice steady. "But I am not interested. My life is very full right now. And frankly, I do not date men who need a disaster to see my worth. Good luck with your investments." I did not wait for his response. I pressed the red button ending the call. Then I tapped the info icon and selected block caller. I set the phone down. I picked up my tablet and opened the architectural plans for the Transitional Housing Center. The renderings showed a beautiful, sturdy home filled with light and books, a place where struggling students could find safety, a place where hard work was rewarded, not exploited. I smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached my eyes. I was alone in my office, but I wasn't lonely. I had my work. I had my purpose. And most importantly, I had my freedom. I turned back to the window, watching the sun set over the city. The sky was purple and gold, the colors of royalty. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who wore the crown. Zora's journey reveals a harsh truth. Your worth is never defined by those who refuse to see it, even if they are family. For years, she sought validation from parents who viewed her merely as a resource, while enabling her sister's incompetence. Her triumph proves that true freedom arrives when you stop begging for respect and start commanding it through your own achievements. Financial independence is more than wealth. It is the armor that protects your peace. Ultimately, breaking toxic cycles requires the courage to walk away and build a life where you are the protagonist, not the prop. If you believe success is the best form of justice, hit like and subscribe for more satisfying stories of resilience.